Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another round of the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 5, the Premier Touring Car Racing Championship, as brought to you on iRacing, available only on PC. Indeed, the Premier Sim Racing platform, wherever you're looking to race in touring cars, GT3s, all the way through to LMPs and Skip Barber, it is the simulator to race on. And well, goodness me, it may only be round 2 of the 13-round calendar, but we have a cracker for you tonight, for we are at the Laguna Seca circuit, known in full as the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, here in California in the United States of America, for the first sprint round of the season. That's right, it's the case that tonight's schedule will not be one race unlike last week, but instead 3 races for your viewing pleasure. And let's take you through that schedule, times in British summertime, that's BST or UTC +1. In approximately 14 minutes time, we'll begin underway with the 15-minute qualifying session to determine the grid order for the purposes of race number 1. And we'll be heading straight into that at 8 o'clock this evening. Race number 1 being titled as Sprint Heat 1. It'll last 15 minutes, and it'll be the case that come the end of the 15 minutes, it's all about being the head of your class, indeed the head of the field, and coming home to get the maximum possible points. And if you can, of course, being the fastest lap home with you, then you'll get those extra points on the board and also score the most overtakes. There'll be bonus points up for grabs there. It will then also be the case that we make our way straight into the second of our 3 races for tonight, and that is Sprint Heat number 2, as it's known, another 15-minute race. But the difference compared to Sprint Heat number 1 is the fact that the grid will not be set by a qualifying session, it'll be set by finishing order come the end of race number 1, albeit with a twist of the top 4 being reversed. So if a driver finishes 4th come the end of race number 1, then they'll be starting on pole for the purposes of race number 2. However, if a driver comes home 5th, they start 5th, and if a driver comes home last, well, you guessed it, they'll be starting last at the back of the field for the purposes of Sprint Heat 2 or race number 2. And again, that'll be another 15-minute race, which is all about getting to the front and scoring the maximum possible points. Then it'll be the case that we've taken a brief break before returning for the build-up and indeed the charge into the third of our races tonight, and that is the sprint feature coming at approximately 8:45 this evening in British summertime. It'll be the case it'll be a 30-minute race. We double the time duration, but the key factor remains. These races are sprints. There are no pit stops scheduled unless the driver picks up damage, of course, and they do need to come into the pits. Alternatively, they pick up a drive-through penalty. It is the likelihood that all of our drivers will be required to go all in, no pit stops, and therefore the overtaking has to be done on circuit. And well, what a circuit for the drivers to be raced at. And we'll talk a little bit more about Laguna Seca in short order. In regards to the broadcast itself, we should point out as a bit of housekeeping that this broadcast is a post-round broadcast. It is the case the racing occurred earlier in the week, and instead we are bringing you all the racing action as if it were live for your viewing pleasure. So I, as your commentator and host, do not know what has happened over the course of the entire round, not even in the qualifying session, nor in the races. Nobody spoiled it for me. I've been keeping it tight-lipped and avoiding any spoilers. And if you are tuning as well, the drivers who raced in this round do, of course, try to avoid any spoilers in the chat, because I do know we have some individuals in the chat as well, such as Alex Nunes, for example, tuning in on the YouTube chat, who won't know the outcomes of the racing, and therefore it'll be all raw to them. And as for who am I? Well, I am Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Brit to the Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and I'll be bringing you all of your racing action over the course of this 13-round season. And the broadcast is being brought to you on 2 media platforms for your viewing pleasure. Firstly, on YouTube. If you go to youtube.com and search your TX141TX, alternatively Paul Walsh, you'll find me there, and you'll be able to tune in there. Alternatively, if you are tuning in via Twitch, it is the case you can go to twitch.tv/TX141 and tune in on Twitch. And if you haven't shared it with family and friends, I do suggest you do so, because the more the merrier, and this is the closest you're going to get to an equivalent of a real World Series like British Touring Car Championship, alternatively the American equivalents across the pond in TC America. But enough about the rule book and all the housekeeping. I know what you want to know more about, and that is the season ahead. Well, it is the case, of course, that last time out we were at Belle Isle in the state of Michigan in the city of Detroit, and we kicked off the season with an absolutely brilliant round of racing in what was the 1-hour feature race there. Tense battles up and down the field, whether it was in the Alphas, alternatively the newly introduced Prime class known as the Delta class. We saw racing up and down the field, plenty of surprises. Those walls came thick, they came fast, but to be fair, despite there being a lot of bump and grinding and a few door panels and mirrors going missing, it was the case that for the majority of the battling, it was as clean as we could expect expected to be a touring car, and we loved it. And of course, today now we're at Laguna Seca, completing the initial tour of the United States of America for this series. In a week's time, we'll be making our way over to what is the Fuji International Speedway in Japan, so heading across the Pacific, and now we're for round number 3, another feature round, and we continue to oscillate between features and sprints for what is the first portion of the season before the mid-season break, where after Fuji we head to the United Kingdom for Alton Park, and then we make our way into more Central Europe for Monza, followed by the Red Bull Ring in Austria, then back to Italy for Imola, and then we make our way back to the United Kingdom for Donington, before then making our way all the way across the South American continent for Interlagos, after which we'll be taking the mid-season break and then coming back for 4 rounds to wrap up the championship, all based in the North American continent, started off the Canadian circuit of what is the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, or Motorsport as it's known in short, a roller coaster ride of a circuit and one to definitely watch out for. And then it's the case we head to mid-Ohio in the United States of America, followed by the home of road racing in the United States of America, Watkins Glen, the Glen, and it was the penultimate round, and then we wrap it all up with the special round as coloured in purple-pink there, and that is Road Atlanta, which is the American equivalent to the Canadian roller coaster ride of Motorsport, and where you could argue they're both roller coaster rides in their own unique nature, and that will be the case that our drivers will go racing at Road Atlanta to complete the championship on the 10th of October, and we'll be bringing you the broadcast a week later, or just slightly before a week later, to bring the curtain down. But we've got a long way to go, and there are 13 rounds, and there can only be one winner in each of the respective championships, and we'll talk more about the championship standings come the end of tonight's broadcast, but more importantly, let's come to the circuit. More known in full as the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, this is a circuit located in Monterey County of the west coast state of California in the United States of America, and as you can see from the image provided to us by simracingwiki.com, the first thing that comes to your mind when you look at this picture is the corkscrew. Of course it is, because that's what this circuit is known for. When people say Laguna Seca, what they really say is, my goodness, the corkscrew, an 18-metre chicane drop. That's right, a left into right combination, which sees our drivers go for an elevation descent of 18 metres between the apexes, and I can tell you, having visited it in person, it is a huge drop, and I haven't been around the circuit in person. One day I hope to do so, but I can imagine it must be absolutely terrifying. If it's the case that you're a thrill seeker in terms of you enjoy those adrenaline junkie rides in the fairgrounds, well, the corkscrew is right up your alley. But it's not just about the corkscrew, this circuit. Indeed, it would be unfair not to talk about the other 10 corners here, and it is the case it all kicks off in the kink of one down towards the Andretti hairpin at turn number 2, with the double apexes there. And then the run through turns 3, 4, 5 and 6. 4 very unique corners, all 8 apex corners, and all based around the idea of trying to get on the power as soon as possible, as soon as you clear the apex. And turns 5 and 6 change the nature of the circuit a little bit. Turn 5 being quite a cambered corner, while drivers will want to tuck the wheels nice and tight into the apex and exploit the road surface angle. And then it's turn number 6, a very tricky corner that runs onto the Rahul Straight, which, as we'll see when we ride on board in qualifying, is a corner with a massive depression upon the apex, which can spit a car out and lead our drivers going out onto the sand, if not into the outside walls, as they try to carry the speed onto the Rahul Straight. Now, the Rahul Straight, you could almost refer to it as the Rahul Kink in a way, because it is a straight with a kink at the top, which is turn number 7, and that's the run up to the highest point of the circuit before the descent into the corkscrew. And, well, we just talked about turn number 8, and we'll get to see that in person very shortly. Then we have the run through Rainy Curve, the left-hander, which is completely downhill, and again, it's one of those corners which is not just about a descent or an elevation change, but also about the corner being slightly angled away from apex, which means our drivers have to balance the throttle with a light amount of brake input in order to keep the car on circuit. And then we have turn number 10, which is a very similar corner to turn number 9 at Rainy, in the fact it's another downhill corner, a right-hander, and one about balancing the throttle. And then turn number 11, the final corner on the circuit, arguably the slowest corner on the circuit, and what is the right-angled hairpin, which completes the lap and the run onto the start-finish straight. Well, it is the case we described it there, but a picture can only speak 1,000 words, and we'll bring you that on board, which can speak 1,000,000 words in short order. As for our rules tonight, let's take you through the rules of these sprint races. It is the case that the setup will see our drivers running a 39-litre fuel load once again. It will change over the course of some of the rounds, but they've got 39 litres in the car today, and that will mean they've got enough fuel for all 3 races. They won't need to take any fuel stops. And the sprint races themselves, well, first, as we said earlier, there are no pit stops expected in any of the 3 races unless a driver picks up damage or they get a drive-through penalty. In terms of the grids, as we mentioned earlier, it is the case the grid for what is race number 2 or sprint heat 2 shall be a top 4 reverse of race 1's results, and something we didn't mention about race number 3. Now, you may be thinking at this point, well, surely it's just going to be a full reverse grid for race number 3. A lot of series do that. Well, we don't do that here at the Alpha Touring Challenge. Instead, we're going to be doing a top 8th reverse of race 2's results. That's right, it is the case that if a driver finishes 8th come the end of race number 2 or sprint heat 2, they will be starting on pole for the sprint feature race or race number 3. You finish 9th, however, in race number 2, well, too bad. You start 9th on the grid for race number 3. We've got the same rules there with regards to drive-through penalties and disqualification. Times 9 instant points for a drive-through penalty, times 16 for a disqualification, and the following bonus points are available today, and we need to clarify how they work exactly. Well, 1 point for pole position, that's exactly what it says on the tin. If a driver takes pole position in qualifying, they get an extra point. Meanwhile, for the fastest lap, that will be over all of the races. So come the end of the 3 races tonight, the driver who scored the fastest lap over the course of the 3 races will pick up the point. So if the driver's got the fastest lap in race 1, but they don't have it in races 2 and 3, somebody goes faster than them on a single lap, they miss out on the point. And that's why it's critical. If you want these bonus points, you have to really be pushing across all 3 races. There's also a Sublime Finesse Award available for the driver who picks up the fewest instants over the round, not individual races, but over the round added together over the 3 races. 1 point for leading a lap in a given race, so that is the case. If a driver leads a lap tonight in any of the 3 races, they will get a point. And there's also 1 point for the Naked Aggression Award, which is most overtakes over the round added together, not in an individual race. So hopefully that makes things a little bit clear, as it is slightly different from our feature race round last time out, or the Alpha round as we like to refer to it. And well, that's enough rules, regulations and whatnot. Let's head back to that live circuit. Indeed, our drivers continue to make their way on the round, and whilst we are waiting to go into the qualifying session here, we haven't got too long to go, to be fair. 3.5 minutes right now, and we can see that the field is mostly out there on circuit, or at least in the pit lane, and we do have some newcomers joining tonight, which is great to hear, and we're able to introduce some of them to you now as they're out on circuit. We've got Jesse Bodos here in the Honda Civic Type R, the privateer, making his way up towards what is turn number 6, and he is joining us in the Delta class, which is great to see, and a very fancy livery there, I must say, the Velocity logo on the side, and that contrast to colours. And well, of course, for Honda, it is the case that recently it's quite a special era for them, because the Civic celebrating its 50th year, Type R as their specialist tuning brand or division, celebrating its 30th year as well, and also the announcement, of course, of the new 2023 Honda Civic Type R, which I must admit, having been reading the press of it, does seem a very capable machine. But let's not think about the latest one. It is the case as well that the current Honda Civic Type R that is raced as a touring car is a very potent machine based on the FK8 chassis, and as he makes his way through the final corner, a little bit of latency on the replay. That does happen every so often. We had that in round number 1, but we expect it to settle down by the time we get underway with the racing. But that's what we're looking to do well tonight, number 100 driver. We've also got some company for Scotty Lunn in the form of another Audi RS3 driver. And, well, when they do appear very shortly, it is the case we'll be introducing Corey Fluke, as we do continue to have these slight little issues or gremlins creeping in, but I can assure you they will go eventually. This is just the way of the replay file at the moment, and we will try and find Fluke. And there is Corey Fluke, who joins us in the Delta class as well, and the number 19 driver here in the Audi RS3 will be giving Scotty Lunn some company, and I can imagine a little bit of an Audi rivalry may arise between the 2 drivers here, as the privateer makes his way down through 1 and into the Andretti hairpin at turn number 2. But good luck to Fluke, of course, much like to Vodas. We also do have the arrival of Brandon Veers, the Honda Civic Type R driver, who's not currently out on circuit or in the pit lane. And I believe we may have 1 or 2 other newcomers as well, but those are the main 3 that we've got aware on circuit at the moment. But if we do see some other newcomers, we will let you know, of course, as we look to David Bauer here, and the breakfast for dinner driver in the Hyundai Elantra, of course, rolling his way through the final corner. Now, as we continue to wait, we have just over a minute to go. We do say hello in the YouTube chat. We said hello to Alex Nunes earlier, but we also say hello in the YouTube chat to John Lauzon, also to Labmob, who puts up the sign of the devil. I believe that's the metal horns emoji. Indeed, rock on, my dude. And we've also got David Bauer there, Adrian at Fedorowski, and we've also got in the Twitch chat Canado saying hello, Paul. I hope all is well. It's very well on my end, and I hope you're doing well as well. And we also say hello to August Blondel, and there it is the case. Everybody tuning on in, but as our drivers make their way on around right now, what can we expect here today? Well, if you haven't been already noticing with regards to the circuit itself, Laguna Seca, regardless of the class, is one of those circuits which doesn't really offer too many overtaking opportunities. Now, it might sound like a little bit of a contrarian here, because when you look at the fact this circuit's got some significant braking zones, particularly the run to turn number 2, you've also got the run into a turn, where's turn number 5, and run to turn number 6 here. It's the case the runs between corners are quite short compared to what overtaking really needs. You need longer runs. So the idea behind Laguna Seca is you need to run close to one another. You need to stay literally within a couple of attempts. That way you can make the lunges under braking or get the run on your opponent to the next corner. Does that sound familiar for those of you from the United Kingdom? Well, you're thinking of Brands Hatch, and indeed I like to compare this to be essentially the American Brands Hatch, or Brands Hatch is the British Laguna Seca, in the fact that whilst Brands Hatch doesn't have major elevation changes, it's the same principle. To overtake, you've got to be close. Alternatively, your opponent's got to make an error, and that's what we're going to be seeing today. Overtaking will be very close, but when it does happen, sparks will fly, and well, much like at Belle Isle, we saw how strong the overtaking game was of so many drivers, and not just on offense but also defense, and I'm sure we're going to see it again here. And some of our drivers' liveries are just being updated. It is the case we do of course have some technical gremlins there, but those gremlins are going to bed, and in fact breakfast for dinner's David Bauer there finally getting the right livery on, and as he makes his way down out of the pit lane, indeed all our drivers charging out the pit lane. The 15-minute qualifying session is underway, and well, who will be on pole come the end of it? We'll have to wait and find out. And now the big question of course will be, will it be this man? I think we've still got some of the practice times up on the board. Unfortunately, they haven't quite refreshed out the way, so we will just wait and see what happens with regards to those. But I think those times are just carrying over from practice, and we will just try and reload the timings there for you, ladies and gentlemen, as I try to make the way on out. But it is the case, I think we might have a slight timing glitch there. Well, we'll press on all the same, as we do see here Abrams making his way into turn number 6 right now, of course taking up pole position last time out at what was the Belle Isle circuit, and indeed running away with things in dominant form. The Alpha driver really setting the pace in the Hyundai Elantra, and we saw that the Elantra was the go-to car last time out. Will it be the go-to car today? That'll be the question. We'll have to wait and see. But we did see also in the race the Honda Civics in particular, and the lead Honda Civic driver being Matt Shepka, as we see him making his way on through here through turn number 5. It was the case the Honda Civics did go quite strong in the race with their braking potential, but will that be the same here today? But we do look back to our current championship leader, and we ride on board here, as it is the case Abrams takes us around for the first flying lap of this qualifying session, as he makes his way down to what is turn number 2 here, completely flat out through the kink of turn number 1, and now breaking his way down the gearbox there, approximately 150 metres from the first apex, and rolling his way for the Andretti hairpin, looking to take a U-shape there, and now exiting out to the corner. He's got a little bit of traffic ahead. That's going to compromise his line into 3 slightly, but turn 3 is a very late braking zone. You want to brake about 65 metres from corner for that late apex. He hooks it up nicely before flying through into turn number 4, and as he rolls his way through the right-hander of 4 there, just a dab of the brake and a chuck into the corner, it's now all about the push down towards 5. Looking to his right then, looking for the 2 marker, what is a 100-metre marker, and braking his way into the corner there. You can see it essentially trail braking it and trying to drift the car into the apex, and now making his way up towards turn number 6. Looking to his right for the 2 marker, dabbing the brake there, balancing the throttle, and as soon as he feels the car tuck into the apex kink, and you can see in fact how the road depresses there on the apex of turn number 6, he has to stamp on the throttle, hanging the steering wheel to the left, and hope it'll hook up as now he brakes his way through 7 and into the corkscrew, and down we go, down through 18 metres in a flash, and now making his way on towards Rainy Curve here as he heads down through the left hand of Rainy, keeping it nicely tucked in, rolling his way to the left here for turn number 10 and battling with that steering wheel. You can see how much brake bias is being run to the rear of what is Abrams' car as he now heads into the final corner, braking the 100-metre mark and rolling his way through the left hand. A little bit understeer there on the apex, carrying a bit too much speed for the tyres to grip as he comes down to the corner. Still a nice lap there, and as he heads to the time line, his open lap of the session is going to be a 31.331, and well, Robert Abrams definitely putting in a good lap to set the benchmark as he makes his way on down. And it is unfortunate we do have that slight timing error on our timing tower that we can't see the times at the moment. I do believe it's a bit of bleed over in terms of the times, but that happens every so often. But it is the case we press on as we do look to, meanwhile, what is Connor Acatella here, and with the Hyundai Veloster driver in the number 55 car rolling his way through turn number 2 and up into 3. Now the Veloster drivers we saw weren't quite there compared to the Elantra drivers, much like the Honda Civic being behind the Elantra, but it is the case that these cars all consist of different characteristics, and that's why we're at a very different circuit here today in terms of the tone. As we saw at Belle Isle, there were some significant straightaways, the run down towards what was turn number 3, and also the run to the fountain at what was turn at number 8, whereas today we don't have those extended runs other than the run from the final corner to the Andretti hairpin. That's the longest sort of straight we have here, but given the whole width of these touring car racing, machines, and also the fact that we do have those short runs, it does mean that defending is a bit easier here. And as we said earlier, drivers really do have to get that run to gain an advantage on their rival, or they've got to get their rival to make a mistake. Now, in turn, what that means is we're going to be looking at the drivers here today who are not just fast over a single lap, but who are consistent. And given the fact that under the Californian sunshine right now, this track temperature is going to skyrocket over the course of the racing, that means tyre wear is going to be a concern, particularly in race number 3 in the sprint feature 30-minute race. It will be the case those tyres will drop off. Our drivers will be expected to stay out and not come in to change tyres, but therefore it's going to be about protecting the tyres as well. So those who push a bit hard in the early stages of the race may find themselves having that come back to bite them on the backside towards the very end, particularly say the final 5 minutes of what is our sprint, our sprint heat, and in the final 10 minutes perhaps of what is the sprint feature. But right now we can see Acatella here rolling his way around that last lap for him at 32.71, putting him at P14 overall at the moment. And as he rolls his way through the right hand there of what is turn number 3 and pressing up towards 4, doing everything he can. But we look from our Veloster driver to one of our Audi drivers, and in particular to Corey Fluke here, as he makes his way out of what is the Corkscrew and down into Rainy Curve here. And as he drops his way on down in the number 19 car, well, it will be the case that for Fluke, he'll be looking to try and make a good first impression. And well, how can you make a good first impression? You got to beat the other Audi driver, and there's only one, that is Lund, of course. And right now Fluke is ahead of Lund in terms of those lap times by quite a margin, it would seem. We're looking at about 8/10 of a second as it currently stands. But we jump on board here with Corey Fluke while our Delta drives. He heads across that timeline and on to a flying lap to see what it's like in the Audi Sport Customer Racing machine. Braking his way down into the Andretti hairpin, breaking that 150 marker, that 3 marker on the right hand side. And as he rolls his way through the second apex there, some drivers will go for a later apex, some will go for a symmetrical. Many here seem to be going for a symmetrical. And as he rolls his way into turn number 3 at about 65 metres, much like the lap we had with Abrams. But as he heads into turn 4 here, it's the case just a dab of the brakes and a lift off the throttle. But a bit of understeer there. You could see how the car was just creeping away from the apex. That's caused him to have to hesitate to get on the throttle. And that means he's lost a bit of run down towards turn number 5, a bit of speed in the run to 5. But as he comes out of the corner here, nicely hooks up turn number 5, now heading uphill towards turn number 6. And looking to his right here for the number 2 board, and as he brings the car in here and clatter there on the apex. And our drivers have to be careful of hitting the sausage curve, which is in the middle of that apex curve, in that big prominent red curve. But he won't be thinking about that right now. He'll be thinking about breaking that 150 metres toward the 3 marker at turn 7 and rolling his way down through the Corkscrew and getting on the power. As soon as he goes into the dip, the car will be settled and he's just got to push through. Now coming down into rain here, taking plenty of apex curve. We'll head down to turn number 10 and braking at about 75 metres there, braking a bit too late and the car understeering away from him. And now heading up into the final corner, braking at the 2 board 100 metres from apex and rolling the car through there in 3rd gear. And what we can see, and some of you may have noticed it on that dashboard on what's the left hand side of our television screen, but in terms of the dashboard for Corey Fluke as our driver, it is the case the Audi, as we saw at Bell Oil, had plenty more gear shifts to have to use compared to the rest of its peers, because of the way the gearbox is very tight on the Audi RS3. And we're seeing today how that's really compromising Fluke's gear selection. Sometimes he has to stay in a higher gear to avoid having to make those additional shifts, alternatively being too high in the RPM band. If he was to downshift into a particular corner, that may cause additional wheel spin. So in terms of how the Audi could perform today, this is not an ideal circuit for the Audi. It will be punchy, particularly in that run out the final corner down towards the Andretti hairpin. It will be fast in the acceleration zone there. And in the run to Sunny's corners, particularly coming through turn 4 into 5, and also the run out of turn 5 to 6, where it will have that acceleration in the uphill run. But we do believe this Audi is going to continue to struggle a little bit because of the fact it's so tightly wound. And as he makes his way in towards that turn number 6, just misses the corner apex there a little bit, and the car just wisely just about brings it back together as Fluke. But meanwhile, we do look from him to Auguste Blondo, who currently are provisional pole sitter in the Delta group, if you will, the Delta class. Remembering the fact, of course, the Delta and Alpha drivers can be distinguished on the time and town on the left-hand side of your screen, with the Alphas, or the pros, if you will, being denoted by that blue slash between their position and their driver name. Meanwhile, the Deltas, or the Pro-Ams, being demonstrated by what is that purple-pink colour. But we should point out that while they're competing against one another within their respective classes, all of our classes are competing competing for the same set of points. It's not as though if Blondell takes P12 here in qualifying, that puts him at provisional pole and then eventually pole position in qualifying, he will get a point for that pole position. No, it will only go to our overall pole position driver, and right now that is Robert Abrams, of course. So do keep that in mind, and it applies to the points awarded in the races as well. And that's why for our Deltas, they've got to push just as much as the Alphas, and every place they gain, even versus an Alpha, it can gain them extra points. And that's what we love to see. It is the case that some of our less experienced or slower drivers, typically based on pre-season pace testing, they do try to come on through and they try to improve and really take the fight to the Alphas over the course of the championship, and it gives them more to push for. Indeed, everybody's learning here. It is the case that this series, the Alpha Touring Challenge, we don't just cater to the fastest, we also cater to the rookies, and we try to bring everybody up together. It's a great community spirit, and I can tell you, week on week, having spent time in the Discord with the drivers and whatnot, it is the case there's drivers out there sharing tips, sharing setup advice, talking about racing lines and whatnot. It's a really great community spirit. Of course, they all have the bit between the teeth. They all want to win, but at the same time, they're all there to work together, which is also very fantastic. And speaking of fantastic, right now, Wilfredowski in the Honda Civic Type R, whilst that livery's looking fantastic on the car, and running some rather traditional Honda Type R colours of what is the white and the red, and also a little bit of black there on the front grille. It is the case that he's not feeling fantastic with regards to that qualifying time. Currently P6 in his class, P18 overall, and he's got some way to go. He has got the best part of 2.5 temps if he wants to try and close up to and gain a place on Wiley Cox. And do keep in mind, of course, Wiley Cox, our winner, if I remember correctly, my memory should serve me correctly, our winner at what was Belle Isle, and in the end the Honda Civic driver, whilst he wasn't the fastest in qualifying, he was the driver who avoided all the carnage over the course of the race, avoided being involved in any instance, and really used the strategy to his advantage. And can he do it again here today? Well, of course, we don't have the strategy involved other than just race as hard as possible and get to the front and get as many points as possible over the course of each of the 3 races. But again, Cox's ability to be able to lengthen out the condition of the car and really keep that car within a nice window, that could help him, particularly in the sprint feature in race number 3, where it's 30 minutes. As he makes his way down through what is there, the Corkscrew into Rainy Curve, it is the case that right now it is looking to be a little bit of an uphill battle, it has to be said. But meanwhile, looking from one of our Delta drivers to one of our Alpha drivers, and in particular to John Lauzon here, we can see the Beaver Buzz driver. Oh goodness, we got a slight little technical hiccup there. That will go in a brief moment. We'll have all our drivers back very shortly. Apologies for this, ladies and gentlemen. It does happen every so often, but give it 1 or 2 more seconds and we should see Lauzon in full splendour, rather than him disappearing and reappearing into the ether. It is the case he does reappear there, and well, the number 77 driver, as he makes his way out of turn number 4, runs a bit wide there, taking a bit of dust and sand with him, and in fact he gives up the lap there and instead lets through one of his competitors, and I do believe that was Justin Rhodes making his way on through. As we do look to Rhodes here, heading underneath the gantry when heading in towards turn number 6, and of course that gantry enabling spectators to be able to drive into the centre field, and as they make their way up towards what is turn 7 and 8, heading up the Rahul straight into the kink before the Corkscrew. It is the case, the Elantra driver here, currently P4 overall on what is a 1:31.62, and looking quite competitive, but nobody really in the region. Abrams this time right now, that pole time of a 30.726. And it is the case that Robert Abrams looking very strong indeed as our drivers come on through here. And I do wonder if anybody's got a reaction. And in fact, Robert Abrams has decided to head into the pit. And I do believe that Abrams is not heading back out. I think he feels that he's got the job done, as we see somebody having a whack to the wall there. And well, that was quite brutal. I'm not sure who that was. That was an Elantra. And I believe they just jumped to the pit lane trying to figure out what that was. But that was a nasty whack to the inside wall coming down the start-finish straight. I think that may have in fact been... No, that wasn't Jesse Bodas, who's trying to leave the pit lane at the moment. 90% sure, but it wasn't Elantra who had a moan, and I do believe that Micah Hendricks, a newcomer to today, is out there in circuit, and there in fact is Micah Hendricks in a rather unique, I believe that's Tetris unless I'm very much mistaken on the car, either that or he's looking like a bag of M&Ms, to be honest, the peanut chocolate peanut brand. No, that is Tetris in fact, and I do wonder whether he'll be able to keep drivers behind him line astern like a good old line piece. We'll have to wait and see, but he's in the 999 at Veloster as he makes his way up the hill and in towards the Corkscrew, and right now no lap time on the board, and Micah Hendricks here, one of our Alpha drivers, I think just trying to get a feeling, or perhaps they might have some technical issues with the car and be trying to sort those out and using this qualifying session more as a test session. And well, if that's the case, they'll be starting from the back. And we're also hearing that Jonathan Stroll, who is not able to make it out to circuit at the moment, and Stroll, our 24th entrant for today. And we, of course, did have 24 entrants last time out at Belle Isle, so we are keeping the consistent numbers here. And I think we've got over 30 drivers signed up. But it is the case that right now Stroll just not able to get out there and experiencing some technical issues with his Hyundai. But as the time is now coming down, we haven't got long left on the board. In fact, Hendricks there goes up to what is P18 overall, a P13. And in fact, last of our alphas here on a 1:33.259, which is great to see Hendricks finally getting the time on the board. And can anybody else improve in the time remaining? There's not much left, less than 20 seconds by the time Hendricks clears turn number 3. And that means anybody who's not on a lap now will need to get on one soon, otherwise they won't be improving any further. And we do look from Hendricks to James D. Carr, who comes to the timing line here. Can he improve and get ahead of Abrams come the finish? I don't think so. I think it's not going to be enough. In fact, Carr there nowhere near close enough. In the end, it is going to be half a second, which separates him from Robert Abrams, as I do believe that is the end of qualifying. It's immediate jump out of qualifying, and the grid is now being set. And let's take you through that grid order for the purposes of race number 1. So as they line up then for the first of our sprint heats tonight is Robert Abrams, who takes pole position for Yellow Flag Motorsports, half a second clear of James D. Carr, the breakfast for dinner driver. Row number 2 made up of Logan Mckenzie and Justin T. Rhodes, and the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver being joined by another breakfast for dinner driver. It's the case Yellow Flag and breakfast for dinner locking out the front 2 rows, and then we have Francois Schink for Beaver Buzz line up alongside Matt Shepka for Torque Racing on row number 3. Row 4, John Lawson and David Bauer line up side by side, and then we have on row number 5 Jerome Bajulaz and Daniel E. Smith coming together there, and we do know those two love to battle one another, and we expect plenty of battling between them tonight. Gurkan Demir starts off our 6th row for Torque Racing and is joined by August Blondel, the Blue Flag Motorsports driver, who takes the Delta pole position. He won't get any points for it, but he will get some pride out of it, there's no doubt about that. Eric Statzer and Connor Acatella will make up our 7th row, 2 Delta drivers there, followed by Aaron Lahr for Torque Racing, who kicks off row number 8, being joined by Daniel Steno on P16, and on row number 9 we have Wiley Cox and Adrian Fedorowski, the QZ Motorsports A driver, looking to try and get a good result today. On row number 10, Corey Fluke and Scotty Lund, the 2 Audi RS3 drivers, coincidentally it would seem, or by fate, lining up side by side together on that row. And then we have Brandon Vers and Jesse Bodas on their debuts, line up on row number 11. And then Micah Hendricks and Jonathan Stroll starting on our back row, row number 12. And it is the case we hope Stroll is able to get to the grid. If not, we may only see 23 out of our 24 entrants take to this race number 1. But we look back to our drivers here now as they line up, and where it is the case, it will be a standing start, and I believe the gridding process is complete. And it's lights down, away we go for race number 1 here at the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. And Robert Abrams gets a very slow start, and as they make the way down towards the kink of 1, it's going to be free ride already, and Justin Rhodes goes round the outside here. Now, who else is going to come through? Well, Abrams goes as late as he dares on the brakes as we look to the blimp camera here, and all of our drivers making their way on through, and they've all safely made it through the opening corner as now they make the way up towards turn number 3, and we can see Logan Mckenzie there in P3 breaking away from James D. Coes under pressure from Francois Schink as they make the way into turn number 4. We've still got battles going on, and Schink trying to go the inside of Carr as they head through 4 and down towards 5. They're not letting one another go, and as they head up towards the braking zone for 5, we can see Abrams has got back ahead into the braking zone for 4, and rolling on in now. Schink is going to be under pressure here from David Bauer, who goes up the inside. They're side by side, X in turn number 5. This is great stuff as they now head up in towards turn 6, but now surely they've got to back out as we see Mckenzie there battling. Oh goodness me, there's contact between Mckenzie, Carr, and everybody's coming together now as they make their way through the corner. Well, that's not the most ideal camera angle for our blimp, but you can see what's happened there, and most of our drivers have avoided the carnage, and they've carried on all the same as they make their way up towards where's the Corkscrew for the first time of asking. As they roll their way on through, we see Jerome Bajulaz, much like a Belle Isle, he finds himself with a huge thirsty pack of cars behind, and we can see Gurkan Demir here under pressure from Acatella, and Acatella up the inside into Rainy Curve and gaining a place, moving up to P9. But the most critical thing here is gaining 6 positions on the opening lap. Would you believe it? Eric Statzer, the privateer in the Delta class, he's made his way all the way up into P7, and he's clear of Jerome Bajulaz. My goodness, he's come through, and we've barely seen it, but meanwhile in the rear view picture, that's Fedorowski going wide, coming out of the final corner, and he's going to drop a lot of places there, and I think there might have been a bit of contact with another driver, but as we do look to the front, after one lap, it is Robert Abrams, who after a difficult start has got his way back up into the lead, is trying to break away, particularly after that contact between the drivers behind him. In P2 and running 2.1 seconds behind is Francois Schenk, as he has got the pressure from David Bauer behind him, and it is the case David Bauer, the breakfast for dinner driver, chasing after the Beaver Buzz machine as they make their way up towards turn number 5. Then it's Matt Shepka who's gained in all the carnage on the open lap. The Corkscrew Racing driver up to P4, followed by Daniel Smith in P5, and then we have James Carr P6, then our Delta leader of Statsa in P7, followed by Jerome Bajulaz in P8, then Connor Acatella right now, where he's just gone, he's been overtaken there by Wes Gherkin Demir moving up to P9, and Acatella completes the top 10 as they make the way into turn number 6 once more. But keep your eyes on Daniel Steno here, and in fact another newcomer for tonight, the Blue Flag Motorsports driver, wasn't there in the season debut, but we will have to cut away from that briefly because there's James D. Carr, and he's gone round the outside to inside on Daniel Smith into the Corkscrew. Then we just caught the tail end of it, and James Carr gains a place as they make the way down through turn number 10, and as they roll the way through the right-hander, it is the case, you can see Smith is trying to come back with Carr going a little bit wide coming out of turn number 10, but it's not to be. There's not enough run and not enough loss of momentum for James D. Carr, and I think he'll be breathing a sigh of relief there, because I think if it was the case that Smith was a little bit closer, then he would have gone for the send. But as they make the way across the timeline and onto another lap here, we do look back to Auguste Blondeau, who's dropped a long way down the order and is in fact now battling side by side. He's on the left of your picture, battling with Wiley Cox here, and we talked about Cox being the racecraft driver here. He knows how to come up through the field under racing, and he knows how to defend as well, as Auguste Blondel tries to find a way and through, and we ride on board here as he can't find a way through in the Andretti hairpin. As they make the way up into turn number 3, it is the case, you can see that Cox having to go defensive, and by going to the inside of 3, he loses a huge amount of momentum as they make the way into turn number 4. Both drivers roll the way through the right hander, but Cox really struggling here under pressure to maintain that rhythm, and as they head up towards turn number 5, will we see Blondel look to the inside? No, he decides to stay behind, instead play his cards right as we see Cox gets it a little bit wrong there on the exit, but Blondel's just not able to capitalise here. And again, coming up towards turn number 6, it's very difficult to go too wide as they roll the way into the tricky left hand, and you can see Cox there carries more momentum. Blondel backs off, and I think quite sensibly as we're hearing that Hendricks has got a place on a Fluke behind as they make the way up into the Corkscrew here. And what we saw on board earlier, what it's like when you go through by yourself, now when you're running in a pack, and you see Cox there losing the rear a little bit initially and losing the momentum. Blondel charging through the Corkscrew by comparison, and as they make the way down through rain, he gets ever closer, but he's not close enough to potentially affect that pass. Not at this time, but Cox definitely struggling here in the Californian heat as they make the way down towards the final corner, and I think a move could be on the cards very shortly as they head through the final corner here and on to another lap. But Blondel's staying right there with his opponent. In fact, he's going to take a look to the inside, and the Elantra with a little bit more straight line grunt as they head across the line and into the first kink, and as they roll the way through turn number 1, Blondel on the inside here. I think it's going to be a straightforward pass. And in fact, Blondel goes in very deep there, carries a lot of speed. I think Cox there just backed out, and Wiley Cox once again finds a way to come back at Blondel. But the thing is, Blondel's still got the inside into turn number 3, but it's a very, very close apex, and as they make the way out, they still stay by side here as they battle for P12 overall. And Blondel's up the inside into turn number 4. Great respect shown between these two, and right now it has to be said that it doesn't seem as though either one wants to give way, and that's Micah Hendricks behind, and the Veloster driver is closing on the pair of them. Oh, Cox there with a spin. Oh, well, a near spin, we should say, losing the rear a little bit, but he brings it back together, and Hendricks, they'll be breathing a sigh of relief as it is the case that Cox is able to get under control, but his loss is now Hendricks' gain as they make the one through to the run to the Corkscrew. And behind them, Scotty Lund there taking a little bit of the gravel or the sand just beyond the exit of turn number 6 and almost losing it. But the RS3 driver, to be fair, has gained 5 places since the start. He's running P6 in the Delta class right now, and I think he'll be salivating at the prospect of being able to take on the Honda of Cox in that Audi as they make the way down. But a little bit further back, that's no joke. That's Aaron Law, who's been pushed out of the Corkscrew by Adrian Fedorowski. He's just been able to pass Fedorowski. They've been battling for some time, but the Alpha driver here for Corkscrew Racing under pressure from the Delta drivers, they make their way out to turn number 10 and up towards 11, and I think Fedorowski right now is feeling hungry for a bit more battling, and we've got plenty of time to go. We're only 6.5 minutes in, and we've still got the best part of what is 8.5 minutes of racing on the card plus the final lap. But meanwhile, we see Gherkin Demir here. We look a bit further up the order, and Demir running in P8 right now under pressure from Statzer. And well, Eric Statzer right now, he's gained a load of places. He's leading the Deltas, but he's not satisfied. He wants more places, and we love him for it as we run on board here with the Turkish driver Demir as he makes his way out to turn number 4 and down towards 5. Ran a little bit wide there, but he got a better run compared to Statzer coming out to turn number 4. And as the Corkscrew Racing driver rolls the car through 5 and up the hill to 6 he goes, you can see getting a better run as they make the way on down towards the braking zone 4-6. We say hello there in the YouTube chat to Adrian Fredorowski, who says, "Go me, go you indeed, good sir," as it is the case, chasing after Aaron Lahr. But we focus still a little bit longer on the battle for P8, and it does look as though Demir is breaking away and finding room here to play with versus Statzer behind. But meanwhile, speaking of a driver who's not breaking away, it is the case that Francois Schenk, the number 18 driver, running P2 overall. Well, he is 3 seconds off of the race leader Abrams, but more importantly for him, he's got David Bauer here, the breakfast for the dinner driver. After these two battled earlier on, it is the case that Bauer fell back a little bit, and now he's coming back as they make the way across that timeline. They go on to what for them is lap number 6 as we reach the halfway point of this race, and now the breakfast for dinner driver's got to think about where he can make the move, because he has Shepka, who is 1.7 seconds behind and not really closing at this time. And I think David Bauer may feel as though he's got a bit more pace to go hunting after Abrams. As we're hearing that Fredorowski has moved up to P17. Aaron Lahr's had an off track, and I believe that off track occurred at the final corner. So it is a case that some drivers gaining at the expense of others who are overcooking it into the corners. But right now, neither Bauer or Schenk are making mistakes. They're both pushing each other to the maximum as they head on down towards turn number 5. But as they head on down, here is another breakfast dinner driver of James Carr. He's looking up the inside of Smith into turn 5. He goes to the move, and Smith has to back out. There is the case. He tried to shut the door, but James Carr came in like a missile. Well, to be fair, the door was left open. He had the momentum, and now can Smith find a way on back? And that Veloster, to be fair, not looking like a slouch here. It is looking quite packed up and ready to rock as he heads up the hill. And as they make the way in towards the Corkscrew this time, I think the Corkscrew Racing driver's going to think about that run, heading on down through turn number 8. And what we can see on the card there, the Waifu's logo, it is the case he may be powered up by his Waifu. Indeed, his team's Waifus. We'll have to wait and see. A bit of anime terminology there, and indeed a very different livery from the rest of them here. But we do love to see the Project Melody machine making its way on through. But as he heads up towards turn 11 right now, pushing as much as he can to try and close onto the back of the Elantra driver of Carr, and running a bit wide. They're coming out the final corner, it has to be said, but that gives you an idea of how much he's pushing on each and every corner and trying to get that Veloster to hook through the corners as heavily as he can do so. But the difference is that Carr just seems to have that better exit out of some of these more important corners, and as they come through the Andretti hairpin, again you can see Smith getting a nice exit, but the thing is Carr gets a much better exit, and he's already gained a couple of attempts as they roll their way through the right hander. But as they do, now it is the case that Carr then making a mistake coming out to turn number 3 into before they go, and I think that's the thing, both of them are on the limit, but it's who makes the big mistake first. That's what we're waiting to see. But meanwhile, looking here, we've got the two Audi RS3 drivers battling. It is Scotty Lund, who's behind Corey Fluke, who's just made the move on what is Lund for P15 overall. And as they head in towards turn number 4 right now, Corey Fluke on his debut here, well, he's looking at Wiley Cox just ahead of him. And you may be thinking at the moment, if I can catch up to Wiley Cox, I might be able to beat the guy who won in the Delta class at Belle Isle. Well, it also is the case he'll want to pick up some good points. He won't want to over-push the car, particularly on his debut race, but we'll have to wait and see whether he's able to push on or not, as behind Aaron Lahr and Fedorowski are still battling, and it's the case that Lahr's back ahead, but we do look from them briefly to Smith versus Carr. It is the case that Smith went up the inside into Rainy Curve and gained the place, but Carr's there still with him. Smith goes a little bit deep on the corner exit, but he has to leave the door open and give Carr the space. He had the right to battle for the line, and as they exit out to turn number 11 here, you can see how Smith and Carr battling is Green Drone Bajulas into the picture as they head down towards the Andretti hairpin for what for them is now the 8th time of asking. And as they head on down, we've also got Schenk and Bauer battling, but we stay here with the battle for P5 first, and it is the case that Carr goes up the inside. Smith looks for the cutback here. He gets the run for the cutback. The door is open, but the problem is now he'll be made to go around the outside in the run to 3, and has he got it on the brakes? I'm not sure. No, he hasn't. Meanwhile, a bit further back, we've got Acatella here, battling with Statzer, and Acatella has moved into the lead of the Deltas. He's moved up to P9. Statzer has been caught and passed, and Statzer right now has got Cedino and Blondel closing gradually behind. And I do wonder whether he's a little bit worried about what could be from those drivers as they make the way on around. But as they head up towards what is turn number 5 here, we can see Cedino looking up the inside of Statzer. He goes for the move for P10, and he gets it done, or does he? No, he overcooks it under braking, and Statzer says, well, if you're going to go a bit deep into the corner and understeer, I'll just simply cut back in up the inside. Well, Cedino there, you can't fault him for trying, but what he can be faulted for was for missing his braking point by looks like he's carrying too much speed, and now he's got to go again. But as they make the way up towards the Corkscrew, 3 minutes left plus that final lap, and we see there Statzer going a bit deep, and the rear coming around very aggressively, but the privateer makes his way down into turn number 9, and as he rolls his way through the left-hander, it is the case. Well, Acatella's been allowed to run away with this, and therefore the battle for P10 is building, the battle for P9 is disappearing, and it is Acatella who's trying to run it off into the distance as they make the way into the final corner. And behind them we do have, I believe, unless I'm mistaken, that maybe Logan Mckenzie, who is a lap down, and indeed that is Logan Mckenzie running P22, a lap down of course after the incident on the opening lap at turn number 6, which saw him and indeed also Rhodes involved in a major shunt, and also John Lauzon was in the mix. But speaking of the past, we think of the present, and it is the case that in this present time, Francois Schink is still in P2. Now 5.5 seconds off the race leader of Robert Abrams. I can tell you he is somewhere out of the circuit. He's just not on camera because he's not where the action is. And Francois Schink right now is at the tip of the spear of the action with Bauer and Shepka behind, and Shepka now closing with not long to go as we ride on board here with the Corkscrew Racing Honda drivers. He makes his way up into turn number 6. And the thing for him is he's very gradually been closing on the two in front as they battled one another, and as he makes his way up the hill in towards what is the Corkscrew once again, he'll be hoping they can just take a little bit more time out of one another, battle one another a little bit more aggressively as the time wears down. Keep in mind, of course, the lap time here is just over 1.5 minutes. The next time we go on to a lap, it will be the final lap. The white flag will be out. In fact, Robert Abrams making his way into the final corner right now, so we've not got long to go in this race. As Abrams heads to that timeline and the white flag is waving, and here is Robert Abrams as he heads across the line to start the final lap, what will be the 10th lap of racing here at the WeatherTech Raceway in the Sprint Heat 1 race. And as he heads on through, he is leading comfortably, but meanwhile in this battle for P6, Jerome Bajulas is the focus of our cameraman's attention, and the Beaver Buzz driver here in P7 trying to gain the place, but he's got Gurkan Demir behind in P8, who's also looking for that opportunity as they head down into the braking zone for the final time at the Andretti hairpin, rolling their way through. Final time of this race, of course, we've got 2 more races after this, but as they head on through, we can see Daniel Cedino here also trying to gain the place. The Blue Flag Motorsports driver right on the back of Statzer. He wants that P10. Statzer's trying to hold on for dear life here after what's looking to be a very comfortable start to this race. Statzer has fallen away as the race has progressed, and you can see Cedino getting a better run into the apex of 3, but he finds a face full of a Honda in front of him, and the Hyundai Elantra driver just too close to get the power down. And you can see Logan Mckenzie there back it off to let the lead lap runners go on through. He doesn't want to be in this battle, and behind you have got Micah Hendricks, who continues to gain ground. He's already gained 11 places, he started at the back of the field. He's up to P12 as the Alpha driver and trying to gain a couple more on his debut in this season. But as they make the way into turn number 6, it is the case we see Statzer goes a bit deep. This will be Cedino's opportunity for that P10 position. He's up the inside into the Corkscrew, and oh goodness me, the two come together under braking, and oh my good lord, and Cedino into the wall. But meanwhile we cut from that to our race leader Robert Abrams. The Yellow Flag Motorsports drivers led this one after a difficult open lap, and he takes the win here in race number 1 ahead of Francois Schink, who holds on to take P2 in the end. David Bauer comes home P3. Next Matt Shepka outside the podium P4, followed by what is James Carr P5, and then we have Daniel Smith comes across line P6 ahead of Jerome Bajulas and Gurkan Demir, and it is Connor Acatella who takes P9 overall and the Delta win in Sprint Heat 1. Behind him, Micah Hendricks, who completes the top 10, followed by what is Gus Blondell, and then Wiley Cox in P12 as he makes his way to the line in a difficult race, but he'll be happy with that P12, I can imagine. And then we have Scotty Lunn here, who takes P13 in the Audi, just beating Corey Fluke to the line, P14. Adrian Fredorowski, P15, followed by Aaron Lahr, P16, and then Jesse Bodas, P17, as he comes to the line gradually on his debut, his first race, and a consistent race of Bodas, and he'll be looking to build from there. And it is Brandon Vares who makes his way home in P18, the privateer, followed by Eric Statzer, who comes to the line in a wounded Honda after that contact at the end with Sedino into the Corkscrew. Sedino P20, Lauzon P21, Logan Mckenzie P22, and then Hendricks, well, my goodness, no, in fact, not Hendricks there, but that is race number 1, ladies and gentlemen. And now we cut immediately to the gridding for race number 2, and we can't take you through that grid order, unfortunately, due to limitations of the replay file available on iRacing, but the grid is being formed, and it is the finishing order minus the top 4 inversion. So what that will mean, unless I'm very much mistaken, as our drivers continue to line up here, that will be Matt Shepka, who took P4 in race number 1. He'll now take pole for the purposes of the grid for race number 2. And this will, of course, be Sprint Heat 2, and we'll be getting underway with the racing very shortly. But as we do look to the blimp camera here, it is Shepka on pole. Being joined alongside him is, if I'm not mistaken, that's one of the Breakfast for Dinner drivers, and I believe that is David Bauer. And then we do have Francois Schink and Robert Abrams behind them. And then as the gridding process is complete, it is now time for us to go racing once again. And it's lights out and away we go for race number 2 here, and Shepka gets a good start compared to what we saw in the first race. And as they make the way down towards turn number 2, it is a case of bit further back. Look at Acatella, he's got a really strong run coming down towards turn number 2. He's already gaining places left, right and centre. And Robert Abrams, by comparison, it's almost as if he's missed the start of the race. He's dropped all the way down to P8. And as all our drivers coming through here, we've got a couple of run wide coming out of the Andretti hairpin, but everybody has made it safely. All 23 drivers minus Brandon Vares there, who was knocked a bit wide, but we must look from Brandon Vares to our leaders right now as they all make their way down towards turn number 4 here, and we can see everybody falling into a line of stern formation now, albeit we may have a couple of moves up the inside, potentially into turn number 4. No, it looks like most drivers calming it down here. Micah Hendricks, in fact, going for a very opportunistic move on Scotty Lunn and gets it done there for P11. A nice move there from Micah Hendricks, but otherwise everybody else now settling into formation as they roll their way through turn number 6. And as they do, it is the case. We can see that Daniel Sedin up the inside. Oh, what is there, Bodas, and gets the move done. We've got a car into the wall, and I think that's Matt Shepka. Now, I'm not sure what's happened to Matt Shepka, but it's gone very, very wrong. I'm wondering if there was contact or where he's just had a bit too much of the sausage go, and that's Wiley Cox as well. Well, something big has happened here in terms of the run to turn number 8 and also through the corkscrew. But what that means is they all make their way back up to speed, those in the instance and those who are still at speed. It is the case. Well, we're going to say that James Carr's leading, but Connor Catella right now, he's leading on the overtakes here. I think he's got the bit between his teeth, and he's gained another place. He's just made a move on Jerome Bajulaz as they make the way across the line and onto the second lap. So after one lap of racing, it is James Carr who leads for Breakfast for Dinner, followed by his teammate David Bauer in P2. We then have Daniel Smith in P3. Those 3 Alpha drivers being followed up by the Delta driver of Connor Acatella, who right now has gained 10 places since the start of this race. Let's just repeat that. He's gained 10 places. He's literally flown from the starting blocks. Jerome Bajulaz in P5, followed by Robert Abrams in P6. After that slow start, he's now gaining some ground. And then we have Kirk in P7, followed by Francois Schink in P8, and then Mike Hendricks P9. And completing the top 10 is Adrian Fredorowski, who's also gained 8 places since the start. The QZ Motorsports A driver, the Canadian, has done very well, but the problem he's now got is he is battling with Hendricks here into turn number 5, with Hendricks getting a poor run out of 4, and you can see that John Lauzon trying to creep on through with Fredorowski for what is that P10 position. They make the way in towards turn number 6, and Lauzon looks at the inside, and Hendricks backs out there very sensibly. 2 does not go into 1 at turn number 6 unless you want to see both cars off the circuit. And Corey Fluke now says, don't mind number 2 is in front. We see Jerome Bajulaz there under the camera, losing it a little bit under braking into the corkscrew, but otherwise it does seem to be calming down. Logan Mckenzie, the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver, also trying to gain some ground as he makes his way on down, and as they roll their way through turn what is turn number 9 there through Rainy Curve. Logan Mckenzie's got a lot of work to do, and Eric Statzer right now really under pressure here from the 2 Alpha drivers behind, and number 7, 8, 9 drivers not giving this up. And well, Logan Mckenzie battling there with what is Justin Rhodes, and Rhodes goes very deep under braking and actually knocks Statzer off circuit almost. In fact, I think it's the case as they make the way on down now. Indeed, Statzer stays ahead. Rhodes backed off there, and now it's the case that Logan Mckenzie comes on through as Justin Rhodes gives a flash of his lights there, and he has been flashing his lights a lot over the course of the racing so far. I mean, it may be the case that he may be just accidentally knocking the lights on every time he brakes. We'll have to wait to see. A very aggressive driving style from Justin Rhodes, but we love it as he makes his way up towards turn number 3. But if there's all this battling in the midfield, it's not just in the midfield. We've also got battling right at the tip of the spear at the front of the field, and that is Daniel Smith right now, the Veloster driver here for Corkscrew Racing. After what was a good race 1, he's now trying to hold on to P2 here in race 2, and he has got the pressure of James Carr behind him as they make the way into turn number 6 once again. And we ride on board the gearbox here of the Corkscrew Racing driver, and you can see as they make the way up the hill, the Elantra there. Oh, Carr's going to get the run. Will he be able to do it up the inside under brake into the Corkscrew? Smith will try and go as late as possible, and he goes very late. Carr backs out there, and you can see Smith literally drifting his way into the apex, and behind that is Robert Abrams, who's found his way past Acatella for P4. It just happened off camera in the run to the Corkscrew, and Connor Acatella right now still battling right up there with the Alphas as the Delta driver, and well, his pursuer is Adrian Fedorowski, who's down in P10, and behind them we see Corey Fluke with a little bit of a run wide there coming through Rainy Curve after what was a great start to his race, but now he's had to lose a little bit of momentum, and he has got Statzer behind him. And to be fair, the one thing he does have to his advantage is that Eric Statzer is trying to defend for his life in P13, and is making that battle for P13 an absolute nightmare for Rhodes and Cedino. And right now Rhodes has got the run, it would seem, down towards turn number 2, and he's going to go around the outside as Justin Rhodes at P13, the breakfast for dinner driver. Statzer defends the inside here, but it is a defense against Daniel Cedino. It's not an offense, and he has to hold on to P14 for now. But stats are definitely starting to drop a little bit, and as they make the way into turn 3, Cedino's going to look up the inside. Well, I think Cedino there was smart to back out. I think that was only going to go 1 or 2 ways for the Blue Flag Motorsports driver. And you can see there Aaron Lahr trying to get on in, but you've got to feel for Cedino as he runs wide. They're coming out of turn number 4, and that is frustration building to him. I think he feels as though he was unfairly blocked into turn 3, and I think it was going to be a door that always closes. And as he makes his way through turn number 5 right now, he's got Aaron Lahr who's battling with him side by side as they head up the hill, and Lahr backs out there on the exit of turn number 5. But Daniel Cedino, the Blue Flag Motorsports driver, really wants to try and find his way past Statzer, but Statzer is making that Honda very wide, and the Elantra driver just does not have a response right now. But as they head down towards the Corkscrew here, it is the case Cedino's going to have more time to think about it, as meanwhile we say hello in the Twitch chat there to Assuming One, who's enjoying the broadcast, and we love to hear it, Assuming One. And well, meanwhile it is the case that Connor Acatella is starting to drop us in the rear of the pitch. That's Fedorowski doing a little bit of rally cross there coming out of turn number 10. He'll drop the place with Adrian Fedorowski versus Mckenzie, but he's still there in P11. It has not ended his race. Meanwhile, Justin Rhodes finding his way up the inside of Fluke as they head out the final corner and in the drag race towards the Andretti hairpin. So much happening at once here, and as they make the way down, it is the case that Justin Rhodes gets back ahead. Will Fluke take a look to the inside? No, he stays where he is, and they make the way through the corner. But meanwhile, just up the road, Acatella continues to find that now the drivers he had behind him are closing, and they're closing fast, and he has got John Lauzon who is putting that pressure on now as Acatella looks for that opportunity to try and go back after Schenk. But I do believe it's more of a case he's got to be worried about what lies behind as he rolls his way into turn number 5, heading on through the left-hand pin. That Shepka's just found his way past Versa P20 off screen after that disastrous moment up at turn 6 through to 8 earlier on for a number of drivers, Shepka and also Cox in particular. And as they head on through right now, we say hello to Robert Abrams in the YouTube chat, who clarifies that at the start of this race he dropped due to a clutch malfunction, or more specifically an issue with the idiot operating it, or as they like to say, the acronym is PITNIC, which is problem, and I believe it is problem in chair, not in car. And it is the case that right now Robert Abrams having a difficult start to his race, but he is trying to close up to the top 3 in due order. But as we continue to look at Acatella here, it is the case he's definitely making his credentials clear as to why he is leading out of our deltas. But in that P8 he's going for as many points as possible and trying to snag some off of the Alphas. But we look from him to James Carr battling with Abrams here, and of course we do believe that Robert Abrams has the one pace advantage and the overall pace advantage based on qualifying and race number 1. But as they battle down in to the Andretti hairpin side by side here, James Carr going defensive. He's keeping that defensive line very nice. That's what you need to do. You need to force the drive to go round the outside here at Laguna Seca. That's how the defense works. And as he heads through 3 right now, you can see Abrams there just able to carry the momentum. But now as they come into 4, both drivers will have compromised lines here, and Carr's able to really park the car in the face there of Abrams. You can see Abrams all over the back of him, but now he's left the door open, and therefore Abrams will look up the inside, and James Carr will try and hang it around the outside. Abrams is going to tuck it in on the inside dial panel, and as they make the way up towards 6 now, who is going to back out here? Who's going to be the bolder of the two? Will it be Carr? Will it be Abrams? It's James Carr in, who just stays ahead, but of course in having to go as daring as he can on the brakes, as he carried the momentum through successfully. He has, and Robert Abrams is frustrated for this round as they make the way into the corkscrew. But as they do, you can imagine Robert Abrams right now will take that thing. Okay, I know where you're going to put the car, and therefore I can now look at a potential sneaky cutback as they make the way down to Rainey. And again, Abrams literally rolling the car to the inside into Rainey curve, trying to get into the header car as they make the way through turn number 10. And Carr goes a little bit deep there, and Robert Abrams peels to the outside. And well, Carr looked to defend, but in the end, I think the car was unsteady, and he had to tuck in behind. And Robert Abrams puts the pressure on, and the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver is rewarded with P3. But meanwhile, behind we see Acatella there going deep and wide, coming out to the final corner, and that's John Lauzon going up his inside into the Kinker one as they cross the timeline, and that will be another place, or will it lost for Acatella? We'll wait and see. I think it is he drops to P9, John Lauzon up to P8. But to be fair, I don't think Acatella's going to be complaining right now. He's putting off a very valiant defence, and he's enjoying it, there's no doubt. As meanwhile, we see Wiley Cox there, a very heavily wounded Honda Civic, and Micah Hendricks has dropped down the order quite so. I think he's been involved in an incident of some description, and both drivers are having a very difficult day at the office, it has to be said. Well, I think we might have a slight glitch with our timing board there, as Micah Hendricks has just been demoted to P23. We'll let you know about that in due order. But as we continue to watch here, it is the case we've only got 5 minutes past the final lap, and here's Robert Abrams, who having passed what was James Carr only moments ago, now has 2 more targets in his sights. The first one is Daniel Smith, and the Corkscrew racing driver here will be looking behind him and thinking that's Robert Abrams right now, and Abrams is not going anywhere but getting closer. And then it's a further 1.2 second gap to our race leader David Bauer, who right now the breakfast for dinner driver, after taking the lead of this race, has not put a foot wrong, it has to be said. Does he have enough time? Does he have enough in the tank to hold on as he rolls his way up through the left-hander at turn number 11? We will have to wait and see. But speaking of a driver who was trying to hold on earlier, and now he is really struggling still, Eric Statzer here, the 789 driver, who looks to the move here on Fluke after losing the place to Fluke. He goes up the inside, he goes very deep, but Corey Fluke there tries to get the cutback, but instead understeers into the path at the back of the Honda and has to back off the throttle. And there's Daniel Sedino here, who looks to the move on the Audi driver as they head across the timeline. This is in the battle for P13, and Sedino's going to gain P14 on Fluke as they head through the Kinker 1, and indeed Sedino gets the move done before they get into the braking zone for Andretti. The Blue Flag Motorsports driver is upper position. Can he now get the position of a Statzer? That is the question. But as they head the way on through, we do look back up to the battle for P2, and you can see Daniel Smith here under pressure into turn number 4. We ride on board the gearbox here of what is Statzer as we get a faceful of the grille of the Elantra of Abrams. They make the way up towards turn number 6, and as they do here, you can see that Robert Abrams is not playing. He's pushing as much as he can, and as they make the way out of the corner and up the hill behind, that is Carr who gets it wrong coming out of the corner, and that is going to be Bajulas, who is capitalising. Smith has to go defensive here under braking. Meanwhile, Bajulas looks up the inside of Carr into the Corkscrew. They go too wide for a temporary moment. In the end, Bajulas has to back out, but meanwhile, Robert Abrams literally all over the back, stabbing left, right and centre with regards to trying to get the nose of that Hyundai in. But it is the case that Smith is having none of it here and trying to hold on the Veloster. It's the little Hyundai versus the bigger one, and as they make the way into the left-hander of turn number 11, the Veloster right now fights on to stay in P2, but it's a long run to turn number 2, and we see that James Carr goes wide, but Jules will have an opportunity here coming out of the corner. They've got 2 more laps to go, all of these drivers, with 2.5 minutes left on the board, and Smith right now has to go defensive down into Andretti. There's nowhere else he can go. Abrams to go try and go all the way around the outside, and as he does here, it is the case he just about keeps his nose on the rear quarter panel. That'll keep the door open in the run to 3, and I think Abrams has got the move done here, unless Smith can find a cutback. No, he can't, and Robert Abrams gains another position. Now he's got 2.3 seconds, unless Smith comes back at him into turn number 5. He's got 2.4, in fact 2.5 almost seconds to close down to the race leader. And I don't think Smith is quite done yet in letting this go. But as they head through turn number 5, I think he may have to let it go, as it does look as though Abrams is gradually incrementing the gap open. But meanwhile, we can see Jerome Bajulas, meanwhile, is on the offensive here, trying to find his way into P4. As they head through the left-hander at turn number 6, but there's no way through right now as they head up the hill. But meanwhile, speaking of way through, here is Logan Mckenzie, the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver in P10, and he's trying to find a way past the Delta driver of Acatella. That is Connor Acatella right now, who's holding on to P9, and the Veloster driver here doing everything he can. He goes a bit deep on the brake and then to the corkscrew entry, and as he rolls as well, that's going to cost him a bit of run in towards what is turn number 10. Hooking the car up to the apex there. He keeps it together for now as the race leaders make the way through the final corner and onto the final lap in due course. But the battles continue all the way to the finish, and Acatella will know all about that. He's been in battle since the very start of this race. After the major gains, he's dropped down the order to an extent, but he's still pushing on as they now head onto that final lap. And you can see that flash of lights from McKenzie. He's trying to distract Acatella, trying to make him think that everything's safe, alternatively misses braking point one of the two. But Acatella's having none of it. He's seen that trick 100 times as he rolls his way into Andretti and keeps ahead for the time being. But we do look from them to Robert Abrams here. Our P2 driver, is he closing on the race leader who makes his way through turn number 4? David Bauer, the breakfast for dinner driver. No, it is the case that gap, whilst it is gradually coming down, it's not coming down fast enough. I think Bauer, if he hooks up this lap, is going to be safe, but we'll have to wait to see if he makes a mistake and is potentially sorry come the end of it. We hope not, of course. We don't want the commentator's curse to hit him as he makes his way up towards turn number 6. Meanwhile, behind we see Jerome Bajulas here in the line with a car with Smith ahead, and also he's got Gurkin Demir behind, who's in P6, and Demir has gained places over the course of this race off camera and moved up to P6, but right now making a mistake of running wide there. Coming out of turn number 6 is not going to help him ascend any further. Instead, he'll be thinking about consolidating now, and as they make the way down through the corkscrew, he's got Francois Sching and also John Lauzon inching ever closer, but rolling on down through a rainy curve here. There's not much time left, but meanwhile for your leader, and David Bowers, he goes a bit wider but keeps it together. It's one corner between him and a checkered flag, and as he makes his way out the final corner, he's earned it, and the breakfast for dinner driver is going to take the points in race number 2 here as he crosses the line. Your winner, and behind it will be Robert Abrams, who comes home in P2 for Yellow Flag Motorsports. And then, oh goodness me, that is a whack to the wall, but I think he crossed the line. Well, I'm not exactly sure what's happened there, but it is the case. Something's gone very wrong. But Daniel Smith P3 ahead of James Carr P4, Jerome Bajulas P5, then Gurkin Demir, Francois Sching and John Lauzon through to P8, and then Connor Acatella in the end held on to take P9 overall, which is the winning position for the Delta class. And Logan Mckenzie was not able to find his way through, finishing P10. Justin Rhodes P11, Adrian Fedorowski P12, followed by Sedino, then Corey Fluke and Eric Statzer to complete the top 15, then Aaron Lahr P16, Matt Shepka P17, recovering to P17 come the finish, followed by Jesse Bodas crossing the line there P18, the number 100 driver Scotty Lunn P19. After it was a good start, it didn't quite work out in the end. And then Wiley Cox P20, followed by Brandon Bears, Gus Blondell. With that, here is Gus Blondell making his way on through right now. And we do have Micah Hendricks, who had to go to the pit with an issue with the car, so he in the end will be classified as P23. And Jonathan Strauss still not able to make it to the circuit for the racing. But what a cracking second race it has to be said, and the tempo has only got faster and faster between the races. It is the case and that we thought qualifying was absolutely on the limit. Then race number 1 was fast, and then race number 2 has taken it up a notch. And as we see Blondell cross the line here in a reversal of fortunes compared to his race 1, we now do wait for our drivers to transition over to what is the warm-up session for race number 3. Now, with that, we do have what is a 10-minute window. That does give us an opportunity to take you through the results from what is races 1 or 2. So let's take you through those results. Give us one moment, ladies and gentlemen. And it is the case we can take you through those results for the first heat. So it was the case in the sprint heat number 1. We saw Robert Abrams taking that win by 6.5 seconds over Francois Schink. And then David Bauer P3, Matt Shepka P4, James Decard P5. Daniel Smith in P16, just missing out on the top 5 versus Jerome Bajulaz, Gurkan Demir, Conor Catella and Micah Hendricks, who completed the top 10. And then it was Gus Blundell P11, Wiley Cox P12, Scotty Lund P13, Corey Fluke P14 and Adrian Fedorowski P15, followed by Aaron Lahr, Jesse Boders, Brandon Vez. And then looking a bit further down in terms of the results, we saw Eric Statzer and Daniel Sedino completed the top 20, John Lazon, Logan Mckenzie and Justin Rhodes. Those 3 drivers really involved in that major incident on the opening lap. And Jonathan Strout, last but not least, unable to take to the grid. And then with regards to what was race number 2, it was the case as we looked at the results there, the race that's just completed, well, as we look back up towards the top of the order. David Bauer taking that win in the end, his maiden win in this season, and it's not just the Robert Abrams show with regards to those wins, ahead of Robert Abrams by 1.7 seconds, then Daniel Smith in P3, and then outside the podium, but still in the top 5, James Clark and Jerome Bajulaz, followed by Gurkan Demir, Francois Schink, John Lauzon, Conor Acatella making it 2 P9s on the bounce, and then Logan Mckenzie in P10. Outside the top 10, Justin Rhodes, followed by Adrian Fedorowski, Daniel Sedino, Corey Fluke making it 2 back-to-back P14s, Eric Statzer P15, Aaron Lahr P16, Matt Shepka P17, and Jesse Boders P18. And then behind them, and not to be forgotten about, Scotty Lund and Wiley Cox completing the top 20. Brandon Vez P21, August Blundell P22, and then Micah Hendricks with that retirement to the pits, 4 laps down P23, and Jonathan Stroll unable to take to what was the grid once more. Well, those are the results for what was races 1 and 2. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to say that whilst we do have this warm-up going on in the background with regards to our drivers getting ready for the purposes of what is race number 3, we don't have to spend the full 8 minutes waiting for it. We're going to be skipping ahead. Give us 2 to 3 minutes and we'll be back for the start of race number 3, and you won't want to miss it. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back and almost ready to go racing one last time here today at the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca in Monterey County, California, United States of America. And it is the case that the warm-up session right now is going through its final 30 seconds, and we'll very shortly be getting that gridding process underway for our final race of tonight. And to just point out, it is the case that for our final race of tonight, it's not 15 minutes, it's a 30-minute sprint, 3-0. We double the time, and that means that all the more is on the line. We've seen some drivers who start off strong but wear away as the race goes on, and others who come into it to the late end of the race. Now, with that tyre wear ever more critical, who will come out on top? We will have to wait and see. But as our drivers do now take to the grid, it is the case, of course, we have what is a top 8 reverse grid. So we will have the results from race number 2. They will make up the grid, but then we'll have a top 8 reversal, and all our drivers are making their way onto the grid right now. And of course, Robert Abrams will be starting in what will be P7, given the fact he finished second place, and he will have what is alongside him David Bauer starting in that P8 position as they all line up and get ready to go racing. But as we look a little bit further up the front, we do have there starting more towards the front Jerome Bajulaz, as he had a good race, and indeed John Lauzon will be starting on pole, the Beaver Bars racing driver, who will be in that prime position. And do keep in mind, of course, that our drivers who start on the front rows of the grid, particularly the front 2 rows, are starting on an uphill position. You can actually see that from the camera angle here slightly, how the road surface curves upwards, and that means it's more difficult to get the standing start launch when you're on those front rows. But they'll be thinking about that now as we're about to get underway. And it's lights out, and away we go for race number 3 here at Laguna Seca. John Lauzon gets a good start, and Francois Schick follows him through. Justin Rhodes has had to jump to the pits, but further back here, we've got a 4 wide already as they head down the hill towards turn number 2. Into Andretti they go, and you see Daniel Smith here covers off the inside line, but behind, Jerome Bajulaz is clipped there by Connor Acatella by looks of things. Although we can't apportion whose fault that is, it just looks like they came together. But as they make, Bajulaz's turn there, and I believe that may have been Shepka who gave him the turn, and well, that is very unfortunate for Bajulaz as they make their way through turn number 3. And Scotty Lund here up into P14, and hold on right now as they head through what is the right-hander at turn number 4. But as they come on through, you see Sedino and Stats are already going toe-to-toe. They continue their rivalry from the previous race, and as they make their way down to the braking zone here, Sedino on the outside, Stats on the inside. They head through side by side into turn number 5. There's a bit of contact as Wiley Cox there goes deep, and I think misses most of the corner. But as they come through the camera right now, it is the case that Sedino is ahead, followed by Stats behind. And then you can see here how Hendricks tucked it behind Wiley Cox. It is the case of Wiley Cox losing ground as they make the way up the hill and into the Corkscrew chicane. And Micah Hendricks here not able to find a way past Willis Cox, but Aaron Knight's going to try and go around the outside, and there's contact with Cox, and Cox is sent to the wall there by Aaron Knight would seem. They were all trying to condense under braking, and in the end 2 does not go into 1 there. But meanwhile, speaking of 1, and it is John Lauzon who's the number 1 driver out in front as they make the way into the final quarter for the first time of asking. He leads come the end of the opening lap, and he is followed by Francois Schick, who is 1.2 seconds behind, being hotly pursued by Gurkan Tabir in P3. And what we see here, the Turkish driver from Torque Steer Racing trying to go on the offensive and look around the outside into the kink of 1, but he's not able to find it, or is he, as they come under braking into the hairpin. He's going to try it, and now to be fair, if he go all the way around the outside here, we testament, but I think he's attacking too early for it, and he'll lose momentum on P4 driver James Carr, who's going to have to go around the outside here if he wants to get the move done. No, Carr stays where he is as well. They stay as they were as they make the way out towards turn number 4. Although Carr does think, no, in fact, Carr's going to go for it here. He's going to open the door up into turn number 4, and Demir obliges, and with him comes what is David Bauer there, and Bauer there just came through like a rocket behind his team. I think it was the case. I agreed on it, but behind them, you see it's the case. Look, Demir loses it to Smith, and he's got Robert Abrams who tries to sneak up the inside, and Will Demir was able to shut the door on 1, but not 2 of them as they make their way in towards turn number 6. And well, Robert Abrams there was probably thinking, I can capitalise on this, and in the end, well, he's in P7 now, as we see run off there. That is James Carr, who's had a run wide coming out of turn number 6. Well, he only gained moments ago, and now he's losing once again, as we see Smith there to defend on the inside as they try to make their way through the Corkscrew. And Daniel Smith up into P4 as he heads down the hill in towards turn and line through Rainy Curve. But as we look from them, we've got Eric Stats there battling side by side with Scotty Lund in the run out of the Corkscrew and down through Rainy. And it's going to be the case that the Audi of Scotty Lund stays there on the outside to inside run. He's going to lose momentum. Instead, he finds now that Matt Shepka in the Honda is closing up. I think Scotty Lund out of position as we see Fedorowski. They're looking up the inside. I think that may be more of a deep. Oh, goodness me. And Hendricks cuts across the front of Fedorowski. I think Fedorowski would argue they couldn't make the car disappear. And Hendricks would argue on such a tight line, you were never going to make the corner, only spear me. Well, that's fun for the stewards, I can imagine. But as they make their way back up to speed, Fedorowski loses more places. And right now, the QZ Motorsports A driver, after what was a great race one, it's all going in the wrong direction, and he'll need to try and arrest that decline over the remainder of this race, but he's got a lot of time to do so as Jerome Bajulas looks at the inside of Aaron Lahr here as they make the way on through the Andretti hairpin, and Bajulas finds himself boxed in as they make the way up towards the break. He's over for 3 on his right. He's got Bodas there, he's got Fedorowski in front of him, Lahr tucked in as well for good measure, and these Delta drivers are battling hard with the Alphas as they make the way on through, but in the end you can see that Bodas backing out massively under braking into 4. I think it may be the case the privateer there just didn't know what to do, and so he decided to take the inside line and take up the speed out of the car. Well, credit to driving it safely, but at the same time, of course, driving safely isn't going to necessarily earn you points. But to be fair, if Bodas gets the end of this race, he's guaranteed to get some points, as every driver who finishes the race will get some points, so as they finish at least 50% or more of the laps completed by the race winner, and Bodas right now will be aware of that. But meanwhile, we look from them to the ongoing battle for P5, and at the head of it is Gurkha De Beer in P5 for Torque Racing. He's got Abrams, McKenzie, and also a little bit further back there, he's got Khan, Akatella closing on up, and De Beer's trying to keep Abrams at bay as they make the way to the final corner, and as they roll the way on through, Abrams doing everything he can to be a forward in De Beer's backside as they head to the end of this lap and on to lap number 4. But as they come past what is the timing line and head on through, it is the case that Abrams will look into the inside here, but he's got De Beer blocking him off, and De Beer puts the car in the middle of the road here, forcing Abrams to have to go to the outside and make contact, but he overcooks it under braking there, and as they make their way through the second part of the corner, it is the case that Abrams gets the run, but now can he hold it around the outside here up into turn number 3? Well, it's the case that Gurkha's never going to let this go. He's going to defend it hard here. He knows that if Abrams gets ahead and runs off, he will run away at that position and you'll never see it again. And right now, the Turkish driver's doing a fantastic job of keeping Robert Abrams at bay, and now, of course, enabling the top 4 to gradually walk off into the distance. And the more time that Abrams loses, the harder the job will be if he wants to try and get back onto that podium after what's been a first and a second today. Can he make it another podium, or will he be thwarted? Right now, he is being thwarted, but there's a long way to go. Of course, there's plenty of time, and as they make the way up the hill, I can imagine that James Carhill will be thinking about a prospect of taking on McKenzie and Abrams. They head into the corkscrew, and Carl's going to do exactly that, but he's going to try and go outside to inside here, and he does so. He gets the run around the outside, and McKenzie, they're locking up on the apex, the car over-rotating, they're able to settle the car down, and as they roll their way down through turn number 9 through Rainey, Carr now stepping it up a gear and putting the pressure on as they head on through the right-hander 10 and up towards 11, but Carr takes a little bit too much exit curve there and runs wide, and he has to bring it back under control as that car's just going to straight line on. And as they roll the way through 11, it's the case that Conor Akatella, the leader of the Deltas right now, well, he's not a stranger to finishing in P9. He finished P9 in race 1, he finished P9 in race number 2, and he's running P9 in race number 3. Is he Mr. P9? We'll have to wait and see as he makes his way on down in towards the Andretti hairpin, but he's got Corey Fluke behind, and Fluke in this race so far has had a very strong start. He's gained places, and right now you can imagine the Audi RS3 driver, he can take a top 10 away of him today. I think there would be absolute jubilant scenes down in the paddock for the team, but as he rolls his way through turn number 3, he knows that's a long way to go, and he won't be tasting that champagne just yet within the team paddock. But as he rolls his way through what is turn number 4, we look from him to Micah Hendricks here, and Hendricks has been trying to find his way up the order with Aaron Lahr, but the problem is that Aaron Lahr battling hard with Hendricks right now, and every time they could be gaining, instead they're battling for position. But I think the drivers behind them, particularly Jerome Bajulas, won't mind that, because that will present with them with an opportunity of closing on up as they make the way up towards turn number 5. And here is Hendricks looking for the move on the inside, under braking for P17. He goes for it here, sends it and fully commit, and that's a textbook move into turn number 4. He's holding that central position in the road, which will force what is Lahr to have to try and go around the outside or too wide here, or back out. And in the end, Aaron Lahr sensibly backs out 9. There's no way he's going to get that run, and now Hendricks gains the position, and he can put a couple of attempts between the pair of them, and that will give him safety for the next few quarters as he makes his way down through the left hand. I do believe, in fact, that's Lego, not Tetris, and if that's the case, I am very much mistaken on Mike Hendricks' car. But as he makes his way on through, we look to Justin Rhodes by comparison here, and the breakfast for dinner driver after what was a very difficult start now, having to try and make a recovery drive of this, and hunting after what is P20 driver Wiley Cox as they make the way on out to the penultimate corner. Cox goes wide there. Jerome Bajulaz into the pit lane, as we're to understand it. So they've got an issue with the car, has Jerome Bajulaz, and that will mean that some places will be gained by default by drivers now. As meanwhile, we look from these guys all the way back up to the battle for P5, and I can tell you that Robert Abrams has found his way past Gherkin de Beer, and with him has come Logan Mckenzie. The two Yellow Flag Motorsports drivers are working together here and trying to get major points on the board for Yellow Flag Motorsports today at the WeatherTech Raceway as they make the way up into turn 6 once more, turn 5 I should say, once more, and as they come through, well, it is the case that now Abrams has been released. How soon can he close up to Smith, and how difficult an opponent will Smith be? As we see in the rear of the pitch there, Shepka deciding to go a little bit wide coming out to turn number 5 and almost in the car bucking towards the inside wall, but it's the case the Corkscrew Racing driver in P12 keeps it pointing in the right direction. He's hunting after Cedino in P11 as they make the way up towards where's the Corkscrew, and the Corkscrew Racing driver right now really pushing it to the limit. He's just not had any luck here today in the races. Qualifying went well, but in the races themselves it's not worked out too well for Shepka, albeit I say that race number 1 a P4 converted to pole position of course for race number 2, but since then it's not been the same, and right now he's trying to bring himself back into that top 10 as gradually as possible. But meanwhile in front, Daniel Cedino, who's chasing after Corey Fluke and the Blue Flag Motorsports driver here. Well, he's having to deal with a car which not many really do know how to deal with, that Audi RS3, given the fact that Fluke has really taken it up a notch on his debut. And to be fair, Scotty Loon running in P15 and he's been doing well as well, but Corey Fluke holding on well, and you can see that in the runs, the Andretti hairpin, that's where the Audi works best. It's able to deploy its straight line speed in terms of acceleration and hold on. But now as we head our way through the corners that are interconnected by much smaller straights, this is where Fluke will feel that pinch in terms of the speed he can deploy. It's only on the exit of turn 4 here where he's got enough of a run to be able to use the gearbox, and that's the problem for him, because you can see Cedino gets very close. He's within 3 tenths here, but now as they make the way up towards the next braking zone, that gap stabilises rather than closes despite the draft there, and as they make the way through turn number 5, that is what Fluke's got to do. He has to nail these runs out the corners, and he's got to try and keep that speed, because if he does, he'll be able to keep Cedino at bay for a significant period of time. And right now you can imagine that the Blue Flag Motorsports driver here is going to go backwards towards Shepka, and in fact that's exactly what's happening as Shepka is looking now for the move, and we're right on board here with Shepka from Corkscrew Racing as he tries to get his way past the Blue Flag Motorsports driver, but they come through the Corkscrew here. No change at the moment, they stay as they were. He takes the peak to the inside into Rainy. You can see the 2 different lines here as well from drivers. Some drivers like to go deep into Rainy curve, some like to take an early turning point. Shepka taking an early turning point. The early turning point gives you the chance of an overtake, but it costs you the exit momentum, whereas it's the case if you go in deep, it's the opposite. You carry a lot of speed in, but then you have to cut that speed away and get the speed out of the corner, and those different approaches, I mean, the Shepka stays with the Elantra and also the RS3 in front, but he's just not able to find a way through at this time. And as they head down towards the Andretti hairpin, this time it's a popcorn seat view here for Shepka as he gets to see Cedino going up the inside of Fluke. Fluke, they're giving the space. Now can Shepka squeeze his way in there? He's going to try it, but the problem is Fluke's down the inside. Well, I say that Fluke falls off the circuit a little bit and in fact backs out there, and Matt Shepka up another position, and he moves up to P11, Cedino up to P10, Fluke down to P12. Meanwhile we cut back here to what is the battle for P17, and this is between Rhodes, Lahr and Fedorowski, and to be fair, Fedorowski and Lahr have seen a lot of one another over the course of the racing tonight. They do have, I think, a little bit of a cross-class rivalry between them, and the number 22 driver Fedorowski, the Delta driver here, not a stranger to battling with the danger of Lahr and Rhodes as they make the way down towards turn number 5. And the thing for what is Fedorowski is, can Lahr keep Rhodes at bay, or does Rhodes put the pressure on the Corkscrew Racing driver? Because if it goes that way, then Fedorowski could be given the opportunity to try and run away with this as they head through the left-hander at turn number 6. But as they do, Jerome Bajulaz, we're here, and he's had to retire the car. They've got issues with that car, and it is the case they're not able to get it back out on circuit, which is very unfortunate. So we have lost one driver out of the 23 who took to the grid, and we still have 22 in this race. We're only 12.5 minutes in. We've still got plenty of racing action to go, and Aaron Lahr right now trying to keep Rhodes behind him as they go chasing after Fedorowski in front. But meanwhile, we look from them to what is Cedino here, and Daniel Cedino still has Shepka pursuing him for that P11 position, and the gap between the two of them is not going up wider, it's only getting tighter as they make the way down into Andretti hairpin. But I think for Sedino right now, here's the case. I think he feels as though he's got the match of Shepko. And also, given we do have that double race time here, you can imagine now drivers are starting to move into that preservation phase of their race. Although I say that, and then it is the case that Michael Hendricks makes a move on them, so perhaps he's not trying to preserve the car as much at the moment, but we'll come back to them in a short order. But what we mean by this preservation stage is where drivers are perhaps turning it down by about 5 to 10% in some cases. They may be battling with drivers around them, but they'll be thinking about protecting the car, particularly the tyres. They don't have to worry about fuel. Of course, they've got enough fuel to get to the end of the race unscathed on that capacity. But you can see here Sedino having to go to the outside. In fact, Shepka making a move, and Sedino yielding there. In fact, that was quite the yield for the move, and I think he feels that Shepka's got enough momentum to pull the pair of them up to what is Acatella's. We saw Fluke losing out more momentum there, and I think Sedino's playing the long game here. He's playing the smart game, which is he knows that whilst they're all battling in an overall race today, and they will get overall points, not just individual class points, it is the case that Acatella's not too far up the road. He's only the best part of a second, and I think what Sedino's saying to Shepka is, take me to Acatella and we'll sort it out there. And that is smart racecraft, particularly the duration of this race. We still have 16 minutes plus the final lap on the board, and I think what that will give Sedino the opportunity to do is protect the car, preserve some of the tyre wear, and Shepka could go hunting on. As into the pits comes Eric Statzer, and I think there's a problem with the car. Perhaps he's got a puncture, or a slow puncture as one identifies. He makes his way into the pit lane, and this is a very sad moment in race number 3 for Statzer after it was looking so good, and well, it's all gone horribly wrong as he parks out. There could even be a drive-through penalty, to be fair, depending on the exact reasons. But in fact, if there's a drive-through, he wouldn't be parking up. But speaking of someone who's going to have to do a lot of parking up, it will be Acatella right now, as we're hearing that Aaron Lahr has jumped to the pits as well. He's been involved in an incident. He's had to jump due to the issue with the car. And Statzer's leaving the pit lane right now, but some drivers really experiencing misfortune, and we can see Acatella has now got that pressure in defending P9. Now, be fair, he spent a large portion of this race in P9. Indeed, of the previous races, he's finished in P9. He won't want to interrupt that record. And as he makes his way through the left-hander there at turn number 6, but Shepka's going to have to find another way and put pressure on at turn 6 to get the move done, because Acatella's clearly savvy to that as they head in towards the Corkscrew. But you can see behind Sedino also getting very close now. And in fact, he's been right on board here with the Blue Flag Motorsports driver. His plan to essentially creep up to the back of Acatella through Shepka is working, but now here's the problem. Now that he's caught up, he's in a freeway battle, and the problem with this freeway battle is he'll be hoping that Shepka can get past Acatella, and then he can turn it into a one-on-one fight with Acatella and then go hunting after Shepka later in the race. But if Shepka can't find a way through, then it becomes complicated, because now Sedino has to essentially put the pressure on Shepka and then stay with Acatella as well and not let Acatella creep away. So he has to balance that overtaking move and not cost himself too much time in terms of the target he's going after, that P9 position. And will he be able to do it? Indeed, who will come out to the top of this trio, where you can see here as they roll away for Andretti, Sedino not getting as much speed through the midpoint between the two apexes, and in fact Shepka really all over the back of Acatella now as they roll their way out of turn number 3. And I think it is writing on the wall here. He's going to have to defend hard as Acatella as they make their way through turn number 4 and up towards 5. And you can see Shepka literally swarming all over the back of him like a busy buzzy bee as they make their way up towards turn number 5. It's the case he is just not letting him go all over the back, but of course catching is one thing, passing is another thing, in the words of course the legend Murray Walker. And it is one of those situations now where Acatella really having to think about where he places the car. But to be fair, that Veloster no slouch and doing very well on the exits, of course, in holding the speed and building up some momentum in the run to the next corner versus the Honda. And as they head through the Corkscrew this time, well, Shepka's going to have the better run. Does he look up the inside terrain? He's going to try it, but Acatella there knows it's coming and says, you know what, I'll just go deeper into the corner on a wider entry line and you won't be able to follow me through. And that's exactly what happens. But the problem is that Shepka's now in the rhythm and he's all over the back, and he looks inside here as Acatella does not defend the inside into the final corner. Instead they go too wide here in the battle for P9. Acatella goes a little bit deep as a result, and Shepka gains the places up to P9 and Acatella drops to P10. And now Sedino will be thinking, right, now's my opportunity to go hunting after P10. Meanwhile, we see here it is the case case that Robert Abrams has found his way through Andretti past what is Smith, and we just caught the tail end of it there, and Logan Mckenzie is now trying to find his way through. That's in the battle for P4, which is now owned by Robert Abrams. They've got Bauer, Schink and Lauzon up the road ahead of him, P3 to P1, but right now this battle for P4 is close, it's tight, and indeed as we make our way into the second half of this race with 12 minutes left by the time these guys make their run to the Corkscrew, it is the case that Logan Mckenzie is on a mission and he is trying to follow Abrams through, but I think Smith is not going to be a pushover here, and as they roll their way through turn number 6, you can see already Smith started to think about defending. He puts the car in the middle of the road, essentially saying to Mckenzie, yeah, try it up the inside and see where those two left-hand tyres will go. They'll end up on the gravel and the car won't stop in preparation for the Corkscrew, but Mckenzie knows that. He knows that Smith is allowed to put the car in the middle of the road. He's allowed to make it as wide as possible when he's not alongside, and as they make their way down through Rainy right now, Smith gets a little bit out of sorts there, but he covers off the run into turn number 10. Mckenzie reacts here, he gets the cutback momentum, he looks to the outside into turn number 11. He'll have to go all the way round, and as they roll the way through, Smith blocks him off, and as they roll the way out to the final corner, we run on board the gearbox here of Daniel Smith, the Corkscrew Racing driver, as he heads to the timeline, onwards and downwards towards the Andretti hairpin once again. They go on to lap number 13. Now, will Mckenzie be able to do what Abrams did on the previous lap, go up the inside into Andretti? No, instead it's going to be the opposite here, and as they make the way into Andretti, you can see that Smith covers him off, and in return he parks on Apex there, and Smith, well, he's absolutely parking the shopping trolley, and then some. He's putting the brakes fully on and simply saying to Mckenzie, yeah, I know that one's coming, you're going nowhere, and instead we'll just have Gurkin Demir join us in this battle for P5, and as they make the way through the right-hander of turn number 4, there's Demir, he's right behind them, and he's closing. I think he wants a chance at this P5, but here comes Mckenzie up the inside, and Smith's not able to cover it off this time, and Smith is going to be in trouble now because he'll lose a lot of momentum, and Mckenzie, as he moves it to P5, he'll have the run up towards turn number 6. They'll head onto the right home straight very shortly, and now Gurkin Demir will be thinking about how can I turn this to my advantage. Whether he can get a good run up the hill here, he may already have the run, as we're hearing that Daniel Sedino has found his way past Lacatella for P10, and Sedino has taken the lead of the Delta class out on circuit, but meanwhile we stay here with this battle for P6, and it's Gurkin Demir now who finds himself in the back and forth tussle as they roll their way in towards Rainy Curve, and you can see Demir, they're literally all over the back. Smith keeping him at bay, saying no, there's one way through here and it's behind me, and as they head through turn number 10 and up towards 11, Demir has to pull back a little bit. He's got to think about where can he make this move, and keep in mind of course that's James Carr who makes his way into the pitch. James Carr there, I think the tyres are gone or something's wrong with the car. It is the case that he's coming on in, and here is Matt Shepka. I'm wondering if that's perhaps a penalty where it'd be a drive through, and I think he's coming into the pit as I look out the commentary box window, but Shepka is being released up another position here, and he's gaining happily, as meanwhile Scotty Lund battling with Rhodes. Well, in the end Rhodes finds his way ahead for P15, and Scotty Lund taking that P16 and running on out of the final corners. We've definitely got Carr in the pit lane, and he is parked up. In fact, is he being, yeah, he is parked up. In fact, that's Aaron Lahr who is parked up right now, and I think, in fact, it was a drive-through penalty for James Carr. It is the case he breached the 9 instant point count, and therefore he's had to come on through. The only driver in the pits who is stationary is Aaron Lahr at this time, but as we see Scotty Lund here falling backwards from Justin Rhodes, we do look up to our race leader, who we haven't really talked about since the early stage of this race, but to be fair, he's not been where the action is, and therefore he's had a pretty peaceful race so far, but I think he may be looking at his lap times right now and thinking that the action is coming, because it's the last lap. John Lauzon a 32.62 for the Beaver Buzz driver. Francois Schink behind in P2, the Beaver Buzz machine on a 32.85, and as we see David Bauer have a breakfast for dinner rolling his way through on a 32.86. Well, they're all pretty consistent. However, the driver behind, Robert Abrams, he's lapping in the low 32s, a 32.16 that last lap, and now he is the threat for all three drivers in terms of their podium aspirations, if not their winning aspirations. And Robert Abrams right now very close already to the back of David Bauer, and they've still got 8 minutes by the time they come out to the Andretti hairpin. And will Abrams be able to take P3? Will he be able to take P2? Could he even make it another win here today? 2 wins out of 3 races in the first sprint of the season. In terms of the sprint round, we should say, we'll have to wait and see. Time will tell. But what time will also tell is whether we will see Gurkin Demir find his way past Smith. Smith has been passed by Mckenzie and Abrams after a valiant defence. But of course now Gurkin Demir's got to try and repeat that of the drivers in front of him, and he's got to find a way past the little Veloster that could as they make the way through turn number 4. And Daniel Smith right now in the number 95 car, definitely showing that whilst he's perhaps got the smallest car on circuit, it's by no means the easiest one to overtake. He can make it the widest possible car if needed. But as he rolls his way through turn number 5 here, the gap between the two of them has opened up a little bit. Meanwhile, the gap between P3 and P4 here, David Bauer versus Robert Abrams, is opening up for the time being. Although I say that, I think Abrams is taking the wick down just a notch and getting ready for the move on the next lap as they roll the way through. And oh, goodness me, it's the case there as they made the way through the corkscrew. Well, a bit of a lock up there from Bauer under braking, and Abrams looking for that potential move. He couldn't quite find it, but as they head down through turn number 9 through reining into 10. Now Abrams, I think, has seen the blood in the water. He's like a shark, and as soon as he sees it, he's drawn to it and looks to the move. And as he makes the run to turn number 11, he thinks about going up the inside. He's all over the back of Bauer as they exit the final corner here. 7 minutes on the clock, and as they make the way onto the next lap, onto lap number 16, you can imagine Abrams now will start to try and go for the moves. He'll try and get his nose on the inside into the corners. They head down towards Andretti. Will Abrams look for the move this time? No, he's too far back. Meanwhile, Gurkin de Beer will look for the move on the inside of Smith. Smith's made to have the door open here, and as they battle for P6 under braking into Andretti, it's going to be the case of Smith on the outside here, and I think Daniel Smith will have to relinquish the position for the time being and look to come back later. They've got Shepka, who is only 4 seconds behind them and closing gradually. We'll have to wait to see if Shepka can get in the mix here for that P7, P6 position battle. But as they make the way on through, we see Micah Hendricks has found his way up to P11. He's just past Corey Fluke, who's running in P12 now as they roll the way on out of Andretti. But we must cut from them back up to what is the battles for P5 firstly, and here is Gurkin de Beer, who in fact for P6, and after he is in P6, getting my numbers incorrect there. It is the case, he has passed Smith and now trying to hunt after P5 driver Mckenzie, we should say. But as they head up the hill, will it be the case that Smith is going to let him go? I don't think so. I think Smith wants to come back here, and Smith is looking very aggressive as they roll the way down the hill. My goodness, you couldn't be closer to the back of that Elantra if you tried, Smith. As they make the way down through 9 and in towards 10, they rock, and as they do, it is the case here. Well, Smith definitely really coming alive. As to me, it seems to be struggling now that he's made the move. But as they head down towards turn number 11, it is the case. They'll head on to the start for this straight, and will this be an opportunity for what is Demir to break away? He seems to get the better run out the corner, and Smith is falling back. As they head across the line, 5 minutes plus the final lap still to go. It is the case that Smith has shown that in the tighter sections of the circuit he can close up, but we do look from here to David Bauer, the P3 driver here, the breakfast for dinner driver, who has still got Abrams all over the back of him. And as they make the way through 3 and up towards 4, not long left, but it does seem as though David Bauer has found a way for the time being to keep Abrams at bay, and Bauer right now is 4 seconds off a Shink, who is a further 1.3 seconds off a Lauzon. I think it could be the case here that if Abrams is able to find his way past, P3 is the highest he's going to go, and David Bauer right now is definitely proving to be the cork in the bottle here for the progress of Robert Abrams as they make the way through the left-hander at 6, and Abrams there runs a little bit wide, and I think there may just be a little bit of that over-pushing now starting to creep in for Robert Abrams. I think the tyres are starting to hit their limit, and what he's having to do is force the car to push to its limit, and as he does, it is the case, he leaves the car more prone to mistakes, because Robert Abrams is a very consistent driver, there's no doubt in that, but I think the pace is falling away very gradually right now, and time is running out. 4 minutes on the clock, a few more laps to go, and as they head down towards turn number 11, he's not close enough, and again he gets so close as to be able to tap the back of Bauer there through turn number 11, but it's not enough. Meanwhile, Corey Fluke stays ahead of Gus Blondell in the battle for P12. This has just been kicking off further back in the battle for P12 overall, P3 of the Deltas, and Gus Blondell here trying to gain after a difficult race number 2 where he finished last of our runners on the lead lap, and the Blue Flag Motorsports driver here pushing on in the remainder. He looks up the inside of Fluke here. Fluke leaves the door open, but of course it means now the Audi will have the straight line run on the Hyundai Elantra as they make the way down towards what is turn number 2, and you can see already, look at Fluke go. That is the Audi strength there, which is the fact he's just able to get a length ahead, but then as they come into the braking zone, Fluke's not been able to bring the car across, and Blondell is able to stay on the inside there into Andretti, and that is where he's going to be. He'll take the position, and Fluke just does not have any comeback after that, or does he, as they make the way up towards turn 3? No, Blondell's finally got the move for P12. All said and done and nicely tucked away. Behind them, Justin Rhodes and James Carr are closing. But as we look from them to Acatella here, Connor Acatella in P2 the Deltas behind the Delta leader Daniel Sedino, who's in P9. It is the case that Acatella's more worried, I think, now about defending P10 overall versus Micah Hendricks, who's all over the back of him as they make their way into turn number 6. 2.5 minutes on the clock. One more lap after this. In fact, there's going to be 2 more laps after this because the leader's making its way to the final corner right now. So we will have 20 laps of racing here in the final race of today in round number 2. And Connor Acatella finds himself between a rock and a hard place. He wants to beat Sedino, but in return he has to keep Hendricks behind, and I don't think he's able to break away from his pursuer nor gain any more ground on his target as they make the way through the penultimate corner and up towards turn 11. And Acatella looks there to a potential move. He takes a little think about it, but he decides no. He's close enough, however, to literally tuck him behind, and they make the way onto the penultimate lap as they come charging across that timeline. You can see also behind the Hyundai Veloster of Wes Hendricks there in a similar situation. It's able to stay with this battle, but it's just not able to interfere right now. But could he do so later on this lap or on the final lap? Meanwhile, looking back to that battle for P3 overall, David Bauer, the breakfast for dinner driver, still holding on versus Robert Abrams. The gap has actually slid open by Tim to half a second over the course of the last few sectors since we cut away, but it is ebbing and flowing. But I think Robert Abrams is starting to feel the pinch with the fact Logan Mckenzie is actually closed up to this battle. He's closed up by 6 tenths on the previous lap. I do think Mckenzie feels more comfortable in that clear air compared to the dirty air that Abrams has to suffer from Bauer in front. And as they make their way into the corkscrew this time, I think David Bauer will have the measure here of Yellow Flag Motorsports. We will wait and see, because as they make their way down through a rainy curve, Sedino here is still trying to hold off where's Acatella and Hendricks, but they are nose to tail. They're line of turning towards the braking zone for the corkscrew. And will we see a potential move? I don't think so this time around. I think things will stay as they are, but you can imagine on the final lap the gloves will come off and the battle will kick off. Well, speaking of that final lap, there goes John Lauzon. We look to our race leader, the Beaver Buzz driver, who is keeping a nice gap to Shink of what is 1.3 seconds. He goes on to that final lap, and then where is David Bauer? Well, there he is, and here's Robert Abrams. I think now he's trying to go on one last big offensive here. He's been saving it up, and he's going to try and get that P3 come the finish. Can he do it? And that is the big question. Well, David Bauer will know that he's got the pace there to hold off the challenge, and as they roll their way through turn number 3, that was near to contact. In fact, there might have been a little bit of a push there as they roll their way through turn number 4, but it is the case they can race this close. That's what touring car racing is all about. If there's not bumps and scrapes, then it's probably not touring car. And as they make the way on down towards turn number 5, I can tell you that Micah Hendricks has found his way into P10 past Acatella, and Connor Acatella now has to wait for an opportunity to take on Sedino, who in turn will now have to try and hold off Hendricks. But we look just briefly at them and then cut back to that battle for P3, and you can see it is the case that right now Bauer is holding on, and I don't think Abrams has got a response. And unless Bauer makes a mistake now in the final few corners, I think he will be on that final step of the podium. He rolls his way out of the corkscrew, getting a nice exit, but as he heads on down here through rainy, we have to cut to our race leader from Beaver Buzz, and that's John Lauzon, who after taking the lead of this race with the inverse top 8 grid, it's the case he hasn't looked back, and as he makes his way out of the final corner, a solid start leads to a solid win. John Lauzon, your winner in race number 3 here at Laguna Seca, ahead of Francois Shink, who makes it a 1-2 for Beaver Buzz, and then it will be David Bauer who comes home P3 on the podium ahead of Robert Abrams, followed by Logan Mckenzie P5, and then it will be Gurkha Demir who comes home P6 and a brilliant effort when all said and done, followed by Daniel Smith P7. Then we have Matt Shepko, who closed up but couldn't get P7 in. He finishes P8 for Corkscrew Racing. Mike Hendricks P9, and then it will be Daniel Sedino who comes on home to win the Delta race here, P10, just ahead of Connor Acatella. And I think Acatella would have been hoping that if it weren't for Hendricks, he could have made that move. But great racing between them. Gus Blondell comes home in P12 with Justin Rhodes just behind P13, James D. Carr P14, and then we see Corey Fluke in the P15. But with a lot to be happy about in his debut today, Corey Fluke, there's no doubt about that. Scotty Lund in the end, P16, just behind his Audi rival, and then Adrian Fedorowski P17, followed by Wiley Cox, who crossed the line there, P18. A very different day compared to at Belle Isle for the Honda Civic driver, but still plenty to move upwards and onwards with. Eric Statson in the end, P19 after that unexpected pit stop early in the race. Brandon Veres will come on home P20 on the lead lap here. He comes on through the final corner very shortly. And as he rolls his way through the left-hander here, Brandon Veres on his debut, keeping it as consistent as he possibly could, and definitely he will build upon it going into round number 3. And then it will be Jesse Bodas, the last of our runners, finishing on the lead lap, P21 there on his debut as he crosses the line. And Aaron Lahr, Jerome Bajulaz both retiring from the race, and Jonathan Strahl not taking to the grid for all 3 races today, unfortunately. But as we look to the scenic pictures, let's take you through those race results for race number 3. Well, it was the case in the end after 30 minutes of racing in what was an absolutely brilliant, it must be said, sprint feature race. John Lauzon taking that win by 1.6 seconds ahead of Francois Schink. Then David Bauer completing the overall podium with Robert Abrams and Logan Mckenzie completing the top 5. Gurkhan Demir P6 ahead of Daniel Smith, Matt Shepka P8, Mike Hendricks P9, and to complete the top 10, Connor Acatella there, the Delta driver, taking the Delta win and the last spot in that top 10. It was then the case P11, Auguste Blondel, ahead of Justin Rhodes and James Carr. Corey Fluke dropping down the order towards the end, but still a good P14 ahead of Scotty Lunn. Adrian Fedorowski P16, Wiley Cox P17, Daniel Sedino P18, and then behind them, and not to be forgotten about, it was the case P19 Eric Statzer, Brandon Veres P20, and then Jesse Bodas, the last of our finishers, with Aaron Lahr and Jerome Bajulaz retiring, and Jonathan Strahl, as we said earlier, not able to take to the grid. Well, that's all the racing, ladies and gentlemen. And now the big question you may be asking is, how does it affect the championship standings? Well, we can see that after 2 rounds of racing, it is the case that Robert Abrams continues to lead the championship by only 8 points ahead of Francois Schink. He's opened the gap up by 5 more points, but that rivalry at the top continues. James Carr, P3 there on 99 points, 6 clear of John Lauzon and Daniel Smith, who complete the top 5. And Smith gaining 2 places today, as it is the case his performances delivering the points, there's no doubt about that. Logan Mckenzie there on 81 points in P6, holding off Matthew Shepka for the time being by 2 points, and then David Bauer gaining 8 places since the season opened and now up to 76 points, joint on 76 with Gurkhan Demir, but ahead on result count back, and then Jerome Bajulaz completes the top 10. And for those wondering, by the way, how do we differentiate between the logos and indeed what cars our drivers are driving in those standings? If it's one of the standard Hyundai logos, typically the Road Hyundai logo, such as next to Robert Abrams' name, that means they drive the Elantra. If it's meanwhile the N Racing tuning division, as we can see that against Daniel Smith, that represents the Veloster, and then you have the Honda logo for the Honda Civic Type R, and of course you do have the Audi logo for the Audi RS3. But as we look outside of the top 10, it is the case that Connor Acatella, our Delta leader at this time on 62 points. A great day for Acatella. He'll be very pleased with that consistent run of results. Couldn't quite make it 3 P9s on the bounce, but 2 P9s, and in the end a P11, and well, that gives him a nice advantage over second place driver in the Delta Championship of Wiley Cox down P13. Between the two of them, Justin Rhodes there in a difficult day for Rhodes, and he'll look to bounce back. Micah Hendricks on his debut, a P14, and on what is 24 points. A rookie in this series, but not in the Delta. It is the case. He has been put into the Pro class. Jonathan Strahl on 24 points, unable to race today, of course, so dropping down the order, alongside Travis Hoare, P16. Auguste Blondel, P17 on his debut, getting 21 points, much like Corey Fluke, who's there in P18. And then we do have Scotty Lunn and Adrian Fedorowski who complete the top 20. And then outside the top 20, but don't forget about them, Eric Statzer, Michael McLeod, Aaron Lahr, Daniel Sedino, Dom Savio, Jesse Bodas, Sean Gurd, Brandon Veres, and Spencer Cockayne. And as for the team standings after 2 rounds, it is the case that Beaver Buzz are leading by only 4 points. They've taken the lead ahead of Yellow Flag Motorsports. It is the case today that their teamwork, and particularly that finishing 1-2 in the last racer today, has given them some extra points, but you can imagine it's close between them. And don't count out breakfast for dinner. After the first round, they were quite a way off of the top 2. They've closed the gap to 13 points to P2, and breakfast for dinner will be one to watch out for, much like Torque Steer Racing, who are also following up close behind them on 19 points off. Blue Flag Motorsports move up to P5, ahead of QZ Motorsports A on 20 points, and then Gasparilla Motorsport in P7. And then yet to get points, but we're expecting to take part later in the season, Axiom Motorsport, BBK, and QZ Motorsports B. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, Thank you very much for watching. Unfortunately, the show ends for now for today. But if you do want to know more about the Alpha Touring Challenge, if you're sat there right now watching this and thinking, I love touring car, I love iRacing, I have a touring car in iRacing, how do I get involved? Well, why not check out our official website, the alphatouringchallenge.wordpress.com website. Alternatively, go to our Discord there, and indeed, the invite link available there, and where you can find out how to join. Or if it's the case you have just enjoyed and want to let us know, be sure to let us know. But here's the case now. Our drivers will be packing up their bags and they've got to go travelling, because they'll be travelling all the way across the Pacific to Japan for the Fuji International Speedway. It'll be round number 3, and the racing will be brought to you via broadcast on Friday the 29th of July 2022. And Fuji will be a very different circuit once again. It has one of the longest straights in motorsporting circuits imaginable. The start-finish straight will see our touring cars max out, and meanwhile we've got vastly technical sections later on in the lap which precede that long straight, so it will all be about who can get the best run onto the straight and the battle of the toe, and you won't want to miss it. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. We wish you a very, very good weekend, of course. And remember, as always, to stay safe, stay smart, stay smiling. For we have been the Alpha Touring Challenge. I have been Paul Walsh. And until next time, remember to stay on track. Good night.